Chapter 226. Us? Can we? Bai Peng was very excited when he heard this. He even looked at his wife, Yang Qin, with a grateful expression. Normal merchants would not have the guts to trade with the Walla. It was rumored that the Walla were murderous people who would raise their sabers at the slightest disagreement. Doing business with them was like risking one's life to earn money. However, it depended on the person. The same thing was different when it came to the mercenaries. As the battle between the war god and the Walla spread throughout the capital, other than remembering the great hero, Yang Chendong, they also remembered the mercenaries. This was an army with few people but with advanced firearms. It was said that each of them could fight against 100 people. When they faced the Walla army, they could easily crush the enemy. There were also people who said that when Tumu was defeated, it was these mercenaries who saved Ingzong and the 9 important officials of the country. As the discussions became more and more intense, people started to worship the mercenaries blindly. It was as if this army was omnipotent. Now, it was these powerful mercenaries who wanted to do business with the Walla people. The Bai family was just hitching a ride. This was a great thing. Imagine, while transporting goods for the mercenaries, wouldn't the Bai family also be able to bring some goods to sell to the Walla people? How big of a market would that be? The more he thought about it, the more excited Bai Peng became. When he looked at Yang Chendong, his eyes were filled with gratitude. All right, we're all family. There's no need to say any more words of thanks. This matter can be settled like this. As for the specific details, such as the amount of goods needed and the number of carriages needed, 6th brother-in-law can discuss it with my cousin Yang Fu. Yang Chendong had a confident smile on his face. As he spoke, he winked at his 6th sister, Yang Qin, with a mischievous look. Yang Qin was also amused by her little brother's performance. In fact, she was even happier. This was clearly her little brother helping the Bai clan. All right, I'll have to thank 6th brother this time. I won't say anything else. In the future, the Bai clan will definitely follow 6th brother's lead in business. Yes, we're all family in the future. Our Bai clan will listen to Dong Shui. Bai Peng also hurriedly expressed his stance. We're family, after all. Yang Chendong's face was full of smiles. He knew that with the help of the Bai clan, business would be much easier in the future. After his 6th sister and 6th brother-in-law left, Yang Chendong's mood became very good. However, everything was ruined because of a report sent from the bureau. According to the information provided by the bureau, Wang Zhen's trusted aide, Chen Guan, was first imprisoned by Jining for a random reason. Not long after, Wang Zhen's other trusted aide, Ji Guang, was also found in a dilapidated temple on the outskirts of the city. Now, both of them were imprisoned. An insider reported that Jining had just gone to the prison to meet the two of them. As for what exactly they talked about, it would take time to find out. Looking at this piece of fresh information, Yang Chendong threw it on the desk. Inform the bureau to investigate all the eunuchs and brocade guard officials who originally belonged to Wang Zhen and have defected to Jining. Find out the pattern of their activities. Yes. Tiger's mane saw that the 6th young master seemed to be a little angry. He nodded in agreement and left. When there was no one else in the room, Yang Chendong looked at the report in his hand and gently shook his head. It's best that you don't provoke me. Otherwise, I guarantee that you'll regret it. Yang Chendong had a premonition that once Jining grasped power, she would come to make trouble for him. However, he hadn't expected things to happen so quickly. 5 days later, just as Ting Shan had left the capital with a company of Leng Feng and a caravan of 300 carriages from the Bai clan and was heading in the direction of the Walla, 2 unexpected guests arrived at the Yang clan manor that afternoon. These 2 were Chen Guan and Ji Guang. After spending 2 days in the imperial prison, the 2 of them had finally thought it through. Rather than being loyal to a dead person, it was better to live on and enjoy the temptations and beauty of the world. They had chosen to join Jining. As a sign of their loyalty, they had taken out all the treasures that Wang Zhen had hidden away when he left the capital and handed them over. A rough estimate put the value of the silver and the items together at nearly 5 million taels of silver. From this, one could see just how much money he usually had. And this didn't even include the deeds to the houses and lands. Among these contracts was the one that Wang Zhen had signed with Yang Qindong. He had invested 2 million taels of silver into the immortal abode, and after 1 year, he would receive a one-time dividend of 2,500,000 taels. He would then receive a minimum of 200,000 taels of silver each month. It was written that as long as the immortal abode and heaven beyond heaven continued to operate, this contract would remain in effect. Ji Ning was naturally overjoyed to receive such an enormous fortune. When she saw the contract between Wang Zhen and Yang Qindong, she immediately had an idea. She first reinstated Chen Guan as the head eunuch of the Imperial Horse Directorate and Ji Guang as the commander of the Embroidered Uniform Guard. Then, she arranged for the two of them to ask Yang Qindong for money. After nearly a year, the immortal abode had become the most popular restaurant in the capital. Countless customers lined up outside every day, so one could imagine how popular the restaurant was. Now was the time for this contract to take effect. Chen Guan and Ji Guang went to a side hall of the Yang clan manor. Compared to before, they were much more respectful today. If not for Ji Ying's urging, they wouldn't even have wanted to make this trip. Yang Qindong was no longer the same person as before. Although he had only been in the capital for a little more than a year, his status was completely different from when he had first arrived. He was now the Duke of Loyal and Gallant, holding the title of Duke. Most importantly, he had a mercenary army that could strike fear into the hearts of the Walla. It was precisely because of this that Chen Guan and Ji Guang had chosen to come today. This was because a group of 100 mercenaries had just left for the Walla this morning. At this time, only 100 mercenaries were left in the capital. Some of them were stationed at the Yang clan bank, Heaven Beyond Heaven, an immortal abode. The true number of mercenaries in the Yang clan manor was only 30. Sensing that Yang Qindong's strength was at its weakest, the two of them decided to go to the Yang clan manor. After handing over their visiting cards, they went to a side hall in the outer courtyard to wait. In the side hall were 4 other Cold Front brothers dressed in camouflage uniforms. They stood in pairs, their eyes fixed on Chen Guan and Ji Guang. A tense and oppressive aura permeated the room. Ji Guang had won Wang Zhen's trust not only because of his loyalty, but also because he was one of the strongest members of the Embroidered Uniform Guard. However, even he didn't have the slightest chance of victory when facing the 2 Ling Feng who were staring at him. Time passed like this, minute by minute, second by second. After an entire hour, Yang Qindong still did not appear. But Chen Guan and Ji Guang were already drenched in cold sweat. They truly couldn't understand how these mercenary brothers had managed to remain motionless for an hour, only keeping a close eye on their movements. Were they not tired? They naturally didn't know that the most basic requirement for cold front soldiers was to train their posture. It was often possible for them to stand there for an entire morning, or even longer. Not to mention that it had only been an hour. But no matter who it was, if they were stared at for an hour, they would feel their hair stand on end. Just as the two of them were wondering if they should leave first and come back another day, Yang Qindong, dressed in green, yawned as he walked into the side hall, accompanied by Tiger's Mane on his left and Beta Persei on his right. As soon as they entered the hall, Yang Qindong said politely, "Ayaya, I slept too deeply. I heard that you've been here for an hour. I'm really sorry." Although he said he was sorry, he didn't seem to be sorry at all. Yang Qindong sat down on the chair at the head of the table, then drank the fragrant tea brought by Tiger's Mane and asked casually, "You two just came out of the imperial prison. I haven't congratulated you yet. Sigh, if Eunuch Wang was still here, I'm sure you wouldn't have to suffer like this." The moment he came up, he brought up the matter of the two of them in prison and even mentioned Wang Zhen's name. Chen Guan and Ji Guang's expressions turned ugly. Now that they had sided with Ji Ning, it was tantamount to betraying Wang Zhen. If someone said the name of the previous owner in front of you, no matter who it was, their expression wouldn't be good. Their expressions were ugly. They knew that Yang Qindong was disgusting them, but they couldn't vent their anger. Was the Duke of Loyalty so easy to offend? Especially when there were 6 burly men staring at them. They were afraid that if they did anything extreme, they would walk out of here in one piece. Their expressions were ugly, and their hearts were filled with unwillingness. But since they were here, they had to get down to business. After Chen Guan gave Ji Guang a look, a contract was delivered to Yang Chendong. Duke Yang, take a look at this first. The contract was delivered to Tiger's Mane first, then placed in front of Yang Chendong. Putting down the teacup in his hand, Yang Chendong looked at the contract curiously, then laughed. This Wang Zhen, he's still playing this game with me. Back then, he clearly said that the contract was lost. Now, he suddenly appeared. Is he trying to act shamelessly? Ha ha ha. He seemed to be talking to himself, but also seemed to be talking to Chen Guan and Ji Guang. Then, in front of the two of them, he tore the contract into pieces. This action frightened Chen Guan and Ji Guang. The two of them seemed to instinctively stand up. Following their movements, the four men who had been watching them closely also took a few steps forward and came to their side. From the looks of it, if they dared to do anything extreme, they would immediately attack. Chapter 227. Duke Yang? What do you think you're doing? Chen Guan asked angrily. This was clearly a scoundrel trying to deny the debt. Although Ji Guang didn't say anything, his tightly clenched fists were enough to express his anger and dissatisfaction. Yang Chendong, on the other hand, acted as if he didn't see anything. He smiled and shook his head. Please don't take offense. My guild will give you an explanation for this matter. Tiger's Mane, go to my study and bring me the contract with Wang Zhen's handprint. Tiger's Mane nodded and left to carry out his orders. Chen Guan and Ji Guang couldn't help but glance at each other, a trace of surprise in their eyes. They didn't understand what that handprint contract meant. However, when Tiger's Mane returned and Yang Chendong placed a contract with his handprint on it in front of them, they understood what was going on. The contract was a receipt. It said that Wang Zhen was in urgent need of money due to the upcoming battle with the Walla, so he took 2,500,000 taels of silver from the Immortal Abode in advance. Because of the breach of the contract, the Immortal Abode's income would have nothing to do with him in the future. There was no writing on the contract, only a bright red handprint. In other words, with this receipt, Yang Chendong and Wang Zhen no longer had any debts. Do you two see this? Before I left for the Walla, Eunuch Wang came to me and said that he was in urgent need of money. He also said that he couldn't find the contract he had written with me, so he sent me this receipt. It also has his handprint on it. Yang Chendong's voice was still echoing in the side hall, but Chen Guan shook his head firmly. That's impossible. This eunuch has never heard of such a thing. That's right. Even if there was such a thing, Eunuch Wang would have left behind a signature and not just a handprint, Ji Guang said confidently. No wonder they thought this way. It was just a handprint. How could they be sure that Wang Zhen had left it behind when he was already dead? Seeing their suspicious expressions, Yang Chendong was displeased. He said sternly, What? Just because you haven't heard of it doesn't mean that it won't happen? As for why Eunuch Wang only pressed his fingerprint and didn't sign it, you should ask him. I'll say it again. I've already given the silver to Wang Zhen and the matter has long been settled. What's the meaning of you suddenly bringing out the original contract? Do you think I'm a pushover? If that's the case, you can go ahead and sue me. With an angry look, Yang Chendong suddenly stood up, flicked his sleeves, and left the side hall, accompanied by the burly Beta Persei. Sue. Chen Guan and Ji Guang were in the mood to curse. Even the contract had been completely torn apart. What could he use to sue? It was clear that Yang Chendong didn't want to return the money and made him feel wronged. Originally, he knew that the debt collection this time would not go smoothly. But now, it seemed that it was not only not going smoothly, it was simply looking for a nail to nail and asking for humiliation. As for Yang Chendong, he didn't have the slightest intention of putting them in his eyes. With their status, they would make people tremble wherever they went. Even if they went to the homes of important officials, they would be treated like distinguished guests. But when they came to the Yang Manor, they couldn't even enter the main hall. In the early Ming dynasty, it was the Wuying Hall and Wenhua Hall who assisted the emperor in reviewing memorials and acted as advisors. The Ming Dynasty's Emperor Zhu Di also allowed the cabinet officials to participate in government affairs, but they were not allowed to control the officials. Starting from Mingren sect's Zhu Gaoqi, he used the 6 ministers directly under him. Because of Yang Chendong, now that there were 2 emperors ruling together, the court officials were scattered, causing the cabinet to be severely lacking in personnel. Zhu Qizhen of the Ying sect and Zhu Qiyu of the Dai sect had simply abandoned the cabinet and placed important positions in the 6 ministries and the group of eunuchs. This was a place that was different from history. But because of this, the power of the eunuch group became more and more important. But even so, in front of Yang Chendong, they were still repeatedly rebuffed. Even now, they lacked basic respect. Just like now, after waiting for Yang Chendong to leave the side hall, Tiger's Mane looked at Chen Guan and Ji Guang angrily and said, "The 2 of you, please." Preposterous. Seeing that the other party was going to drive them away, Ji Guang finally couldn't hold it in anymore. After a flash of coldness flashed in his eyes, he suddenly reached out to grab Tiger's Mane's neck. Like a giant eagle stretching out its claws, he went straight for the throat. Previously, Ji Guang had been hiding in the ruined temple for a long time and had been sullen for a long time. Now that he was finally restored to his official position, he could finally show his strength. Now, he was treated so lightly by a duke with no real power, and even a servant dared to shout at him. How could he bear it? Ji Guang, who was angry, finally couldn't hold it in and exploded. His arm was like a long snake. Under the sudden explosion, there seemed to be a popping sound in the air as he grabbed at the air. "Come at me." Facing this sudden attack, Tiger's Mane wasn't afraid. Instead, he was happy and calm. With a loud laugh, his body suddenly leaned back. With his feet as the axis, his whole body leaned back. Although he was leaning backwards, he did not fall down. Instead, he was like a roly-poly toy. When he fell down, he spun around and stood firm again. At the same time, he threw a heavy punch forward like a tiger stirring up wind. Ji Guang had the idea of striking first to gain the upper hand. He threw a quick punch in order to vent the anger in his heart and also to remind Yang Chendong that he, an embroidered uniform guard, wasn't so easy to deal with. He had real skills. Never would he have thought that his punch would hit nothing but air. When he didn't hit the target, his body naturally leaned forward. At this time, Tiger's Mane threw a heavy punch back. As expected of an expert in the embroidered uniform guard, Ji Guang's reaction was very fast. When he saw the heavy punch in front of him, his body quickly retreated. In the eyes of others, the punch was close to the chest. It seemed like it could hit at any time, but it was always just a little bit off. Ji Guang kept retreating while Tiger's Mane kept chasing. This situation continued until Ji Guang's body leaned back to a certain extent. Until Tiger's Mane used up all the strength in his punch, there was still a distance of 2 centimeters between them. At this moment, the 2 of them had already stood still and maintained a somewhat ambiguous aura. Ji Guang's body leaned back and Tiger's Mane's body leaned forward, so that the distance between their eyes was less than 50 centimeters. Hee. It seemed like the fight had ended. While Ji Guang was still secretly shocked by the strength of the Yang family's servants, he suddenly saw a strange smile on Tiger's Mane's face. This smile made Ji Guang's heart sink. He instinctively had a bad feeling. As soon as he sensed it, he saw Tiger Light's fist, which was about to hit Ji Guang's chest, suddenly turn into a palm. At the same time, it lengthened by 2 centimeters and stabbed into Ji Guang's heart like a sharp blade. Ji Guang suddenly felt a sharp pain. Then, the pain became stronger and stronger until his whole body bent into the shape of a prawn. He was completely tangled up. "You let me win, you let me win." In this exchange, Ji Guang suffered a great loss. He retreated, his face extremely pale. However, the 2 members of the Cold Blade Division who had been staring at him didn't have any intention of letting him go. They stepped forward, one on the left and one on the right. They clenched their fists and looked like they were going to teach him a lesson. He actually dared to make the first move under their watch. This was a provocation to them. Forget it, forget it. He has already learned his lesson. Of course, if he dares to make a move for no reason next time, we will have to beat him up again and hand him over to you to deal with. Tiger's Mane took advantage of the situation and stopped the two members of the Cold Blade Division. However, his words were full of sarcasm. He couldn't beat them in a fight, and he wasn't competitive in scaring them. Moreover, he didn't have a handle on them. Chen Guan analyzed that there was no point in staying here. Alright, Wuxia Xianxia, let's go. However, as the saying goes, the mountains will not change and the rivers will flow forever. Let's wait and see. No matter what, he was still the head eunuch of the Imperial Horse Directorate. He was used to being high and mighty. Now that he had been slapped in the face, it was in line with his personality to leave behind such harsh words. If it were anyone else, hearing such a threat, even if they didn't tremble in fear, their expression would have changed greatly. However, in Tiger's Mane's eyes, he laughed out loud in a completely different manner. As the saying goes, the mountains will not change. In that case, let's wait and see. I only hope that Eunuch Chen won't regret it. This duke has never known what regret is. Chen Guan angrily reprimanded Tiger's Mane, his face full of indignation. When these words came out, Tiger's Mane's face was also full of anger. Eunuch Chen, you're just a eunuch. Please remember your status. You can call yourself an eunuch, but you can't call yourself an eunuch. Otherwise, you'll have to pay a heavy price. Ha ha ha. As if he had found a way to turn the tables, Chen Guan laughed out loud. My apologies, this duke is already used to calling myself an eunuch. I'm afraid I can't change it, ha ha ha. Chen Guan pulled Ji Guang, who had been punched, away and left Yang Manor. However, as soon as they left the manor, he changed from his earlier laughing expression to that of Ji Guang. Wuxia Xianxia, this time we messed up our mission. I'm afraid that Eunuch Jean won't be too happy. What should we do? Daring to hurt a member of our embroidered uniform guard, this loyal eunuch is clearly audacious. Next, this official will let them know that there are some things that they can't do, or even think about. Don't worry, I'll make arrangements when I get back. Ji Guang's face was full of anger, but he couldn't be blamed for his actions. Tiger's Mane's punch just now wasn't light. If it weren't for his superb martial arts skills, it was possible that he would have lost half his life. Alright, if you need this duke's cooperation, just let me know, Chen Guan said angrily. It was obvious that at this moment, he hated Yang Chendong to the bone. Chapter 228. Yang Manor. Tiger's Mane came to Yang Chendong's study and recounted what had just happened, as well as the harsh words Chen Guan had said before he left. Young master, they're too arrogant. I really regret that I only used 60% of my strength in that punch. I should have used more strength and left Ji Guang here. Sigh. Yang Chendong shook his head. No matter what, the other party is still the commander of the Brocade Guards, a dignified fourth-rank official. If we kill him here, it'll be hard to explain to the outside world. But they've already left Yang Manor, Yang Chendong, who looked displeased, snorted coldly. Walla had just retreated not long ago and had just reached an agreement with Jining. The two of them had not interfered with each other's business. Who would have thought that he would come looking for trouble so soon? This time, it was true that he wanted the silver, but more importantly, he wanted to test his reaction. Since that was the case, he couldn't disappoint. Didn't you want to see my reaction? Then I'll let you know what the consequences of offending Yang Manor are. Tiger's Mane, make the arrangements immediately and act according to the plan. But remember, you have to act appropriately. You can't kill anyone. You have to let some people know what it means to live a life worse than death. Yang Chendong gave the order, and Tiger's Mane's eyes immediately lit up. Please rest assured, young master. I'll go inform them and make the arrangements personally. After saying this, Tiger's Mane turned to leave, but unfortunately, Yang Chendong's voice came from behind him. You don't have to go. Arrange for someone to inform Yang San. It'll be a good opportunity to test the actual combat ability of the newly established operation team of your security bureau. Oh right, after you're done, tell the people in the manor that in an hour, this young master will take the ladies to Chicken Crow Mountain for a tour. You and Beta Persei can't be absent. Yang Qindong naturally knew that Tiger's Mane wanted to do it himself. He could understand this feeling, but now was not the time to turn hostile. An appropriate warning was fine, but he still understood the principle of overdoing it. At the very least, the people who are always around him must be cleared of suspicion during the operation. Tiger's Mane's face, which was originally full of excitement, immediately turned bitter. He knew that the possibility of warming up was gone. However, since this was an order from the young master, he naturally wouldn't go against it. He lowered his head and complied. An hour later, Yang Qindong brought Hu Yan and Xiao Yin, as well as a platoon of Lungfeng brothers, as well as Qiu V's first squad, and headed straight for Chicken Crow Mountain. On this trip, there were more than 10 carriages loaded with goods. It could be seen that Yang Qindong was prepared to stay for a while. In the capital, Deputy Bureau Chief Yang San received an order from the Yang family manor. Beside him stood the captain of the Ghost Sniper Squad, Bai Zhua, and an unfamiliar man with cold eyes. Ha ha ha, the young master is finally going to make a move. This is our Ghost Sniper Squad's chance to show off. After receiving the order, Bai Zhua's face lit up with joy. He seemed to have seen another addition to his list of achievements. However, as the person directly carrying out the order, Yang San didn't show anything on his face. He also ignored Bai Zhua's excitement. Instead, he looked at the unfamiliar man and said, Captain Tai, what do you think? Captain Tai, full name Tai Hu, was the captain of Yang Xie's new army, the Wolf-Fang Special Forces. The Wolf-Fang Special Forces was a special squad formed under the special request of Yang Qindong. They were used to carry out any special tasks. There weren't many of them, only 20 of them. However, every one of them was carefully selected from the elite members of the Cold Vanguard. They were capable, well-equipped, agile, well-trained, and strong in combat. Regardless of whether it was reconnaissance, assassination, camouflage, or firearms, they were all very skilled. Such a squad was also one of Yang Qindong's trump cards. If the Ghost Sniper Squad was said to be able to take people's lives from a distance, then the Wolf-Fang Special Forces was the trump card in close combat. Yang Qindong, who had exposed some of his strength, had already given an order to Qiqian City to let the Wolf-Fang Special Forces rush to the capital. This time, in order to give a warning to the eunuch group, he temporarily lent them to Deputy Bureau Chief Yang San so that they could complete the task better. As soon as they arrived, they were temporarily assigned to the operation team of the Security Bureau. According to Yang Qindong's intention, they would be separated after training more outstanding talents. Tai Hu, who was named, answered without hesitation when asked what he thought of this matter. The sixth young master's words are orders. It is an order that must be completed. Deputy Bureau Chief Yang San, please give the task to us. We will definitely give you a surprise tonight. Okay, I believe in Captain Tai. If you have any ideas, just do it. If you need our cooperation, please let us know. My security bureau and the Ghost Sniper Squad will fully cooperate with you. Yang San's voice came out immediately. Since Yang Qindong attached so much importance to this matter, Yang San of course had to perform well. This was also the first appearance of the Wolf-Fang Special Forces since its establishment. It was time for them to show their skills. Nanxing district of the capital. There were many ancient courtyards here. Most of these courtyards belonged to the royal family, so many of them were eventually occupied by eunuchs. The pavilion closest to the water enjoys the moonlight first. With the emperor's trust, the eunuchs were powerful, they acted on behalf of the emperor, and they were awe-inspiring. In one of the courtyards, a beardless man in brocade clothes was resting in a small pavilion in the courtyard. Although this person looked ordinary and was not tall enough, in fact, he was a eunuch leader with real power. He was in charge of more than 30 eunuchs. And with his position, he was qualified to have the right to live outside. When he was not on duty, he would go back to his small courtyard to enjoy himself. He abandoned the servile appearance in the palace and bowed to everyone. He enjoyed the feeling of being the master. Two delicate-looking maids brought a fruit plate and tea to the small pavilion and served the eunuch. He squinted his eyes happily as he enjoyed himself. This was the life of a superior person. This was the dream he should pursue. Just as he was enjoying his beautiful life, the eunuch, who had just closed his eyes, felt that his surroundings were quiet. That kind of silence gave him a creepy feeling. Instinctively, he wanted to open his eyes to see what was going on. Just as he had this thought, a cold chill came from his neck. Although he still did not open his eyes, his perception had told him that there should be a sharp and cold dagger on his neck. Don't even think about opening your eyes. Otherwise, the moment you see my face, it will be the moment you meet the king of hell. A cold and indifferent voice suddenly sounded in his ear. This voice made the eunuch's body tremble. The smooth and slick side of his bones was also revealed. Brother, I won't open my eyes. Please don't hurt me. Tell me, what do you want? Is it silver? I don't have much, but it is enough for ordinary people to live a peaceful life. Pooh. Just as he finished speaking, there was a sudden pain in his right arm. The eunuch could not help but open his mouth and howl. However, the coldness that had just left returned to his neck. You can scream, but before they arrive, I guarantee that the first person to die will be you. Ah. I won't scream. When he felt the killing intent, the eunuch became very obedient. Pooh. Another knife stabbed into his left arm. The eunuch almost could not help but scream. Although he controlled his voice because of the fear of death, his whole body could not help but twist. He really could not understand. Why did the other party stab him twice without any request? Could it be that this was not for money, but because he had offended someone and was here to seek revenge? Fortunately, the answer came out quickly. He heard the voice in his ear. You better remember, you can call yourself this eunuch in the future, but you must not call yourself this eunuch to save trouble. Otherwise, next time, I won't just hurt your arms, I will directly take your life. Remember. The cold voice was still echoing in his mind, but the eunuch's mind was already at a loss. He really couldn't figure out what was going on. Could it be that the other party wanted to kill him because of a title? What kind of logic was this? How was this possible? If this matter was told to him by someone else, it would be hard to believe. But now, the real thing was happening to him. Moreover, the piercing pain under his arms made him want to twitch uncontrollably. Everything was so real that it couldn't be faked. So what was going on? Village Gazing Pavilion. This was one of the most famous restaurants in the capital. Before the rise of the immortal abode, no one would have doubted that this was one of the 10 great restaurants of the capital. But now, this place had fallen into decline. But even though it had declined, it had once been prosperous. One could still see its former glory here, and it could still attract nostalgic customers. Ji Guang was one of them. Before Yang Chendong had come to the capital, before the immortal abode, Ji Guang had been a frequent customer here. Because of his generosity, the proprietress of this restaurant had treated him with special treatment. But because this woman already had a man, Ji Guang did not do anything excessive out of respect for the sake of morality and etiquette. Until recently. It was rumored that the Walla's army might break into the capital, and business there was already difficult. The proprietress of the village gazing pavilion left for Nanjing, but his wife did not. In her words, the village gazing pavilion was her life. Even if she had to die, she would die here. Their opinions differed, and the result was a peaceful divorce. The woman bought the village gazing pavilion with silver and kept it. Chapter 229. A while ago, Ji Guang had been hiding in the ruined temple and had no idea what was going on in the outside world. This time, after pledging allegiance to Jining, he finally regained his freedom. Tonight, he appeared here and saw Li Xiu, the woman who still had some charm and had feelings for him. In the private room, Li Xiu boldly confided her feelings to Ji Guang. She also said that as a divorced woman, she did not ask to be a bride. As long as Ji Guang was willing to come and see her often, she would be satisfied. This kind of attitude and idea of being a mistress was very advanced in this era. It also made Ji Guang very touched. However, he did not immediately agree. According to his thinking, although his position seemed to be high and powerful, he didn't know how many people were watching him. If he wasn't careful, he didn't know where he would lose his life. He couldn't give Li Xiu any sense of security. He did not agree. When Ji Guang left the village pavilion, although he did not look back, it was as if he had eyes in the back of his head. He could feel that Li Xiu was heartbroken and tearful. Hardening his heart, Ji Guang did not look back. He walked out of the village pavilion and came to the street. At this time, it was already the curfew time and the street was very deserted. However, as the commander of the embroidered uniform guards, Xianxia naturally did not have to worry about being interrogated by the military office of the 5 cities. He was still thinking about Li Xiu and walking alone on the quiet street. Suddenly, a bone-chilling feeling spread throughout his body. An instinct made him stop abruptly and reach out to touch his waist out of habit. Ji Guang's reaction was very fast. With his sixth sense, he sensed the danger in advance. It was a pity that he was facing Tai Hu, the captain of the Langia Special Forces. Tai Hu originally wanted to make a move on Xinguan, but the Security Bureau's intelligence showed that this person would not come out of the palace tonight. Therefore, he settled for the next best thing and chose Ji Guang. He heard that this person had some skills and wanted to learn from him. Tai Hu, who suddenly appeared, did not wait for Ji Guang to draw his sword. He slashed at him first. A piece of hair fell down from the tip and fluttered to the ground. Ji Guang's face was already ghastly pale. He knew that it was not that his opponent's saber technique was not good enough, but that he had done it intentionally. If his opponent had wanted to take his life, he would have been a dead man by now. Who are you? Why do you want to kill me? Do we have any grudges? Ji Guang stared at the other's eyes in the dark and asked nervously. Cut the crap and draw your blade. Today, I'll teach you a lesson. You'll understand how laughable your little bit of martial power is in front of a true expert. Tai Hu had no intention of revealing his identity. Today, not only did he want to hurt Ji Guang and make him pay for what he did during the day, he also wanted to instill fear in his heart so that he would never dare to go against the 6th young master again. Ji Guang was also an experienced and knowledgeable person who had experienced many trials of life and death. Naturally, he could tell that the other party had no intention of talking nonsense with him. Confident in his saber skills, he drew his saber with a clang and pointed it at Tai Hu. All right, let this official see just how strong you are. Humph. Ignorant. Seeing Ji Guang draw his saber, Tai Hu's eyes flashed with contempt. He was one of the earliest members of the Cold Front. Because of his ruthlessness and decisiveness, he was admired by Yang Qindong and was given a saber technique for close combat. This saber technique was not flashy, but every move was fatal. It was originally the result of Yang Qindong's countless experiences of life and death. It was fine if he did not make a move, but when he did, it was a saber technique that could kill with a single strike. Because of this, when the first batch of Langfeng graduates graduated, Tai Hu even received an extra triangular stiletto made of titanium compared to the others. This stiletto could cut through iron like mud. In Tai Hu's hands, it was like a tiger that had grown wings. He did not believe that there was anyone who could be his opponent in close combat. Now that Ji Guang had drawn his embroidered spring saber, he naturally did not fear him in the slightest. He even had enough confidence. After saying that he was ignorant, Tai Hu moved. He swept towards Ji Guang like a gust of wind. Ji Guang also moved, but he adopted a conservative defensive strategy. Before he figured out the tricks and details of the person in front of him, he decided to use defense instead of offense, looking for the most suitable opportunity. In the past, when faced with a sneak attack, Ji Guang also did the same. Moreover, he had succeeded. Who knew how many people had fallen in front of him, and he had found an opportunity to kill them instead. But this time, although he was full of confidence, he was destined to be disappointed. This was because the moment the military knife and embroidered spring saber collided with each other, the saber's body was split into two after the collision. By the time Ji Guang reacted, he felt a sharp pain on his left leg. There was already a deep cut there. Ji Guang did not know that this was because Yang Chendong had given the order not to kill anyone. Otherwise, if Tai Hu had changed the cut to a stiletto, a wound that could not be stopped would have appeared. Then, even if he did not die now, it would not be long before he died because of the incessant bleeding. With just one move, Ji Guang was defeated. His left leg was trembling because of the flowing force, and he could not even stand steadily. How could he dare to think about winning? After Tai Hu succeeded in one move, he put away the triangular stiletto that was covered in white light. Then, he turned and left without saying another word. Sometimes, when facing smart people, if you had to tell them your purpose, it would be an insult to their intelligence. Tai Hu left. Just like when he came, he suddenly appeared, and when he left, he suddenly disappeared. When he was sure that there was no killing intent in the surroundings and no danger, Ji Guang's left leg went soft, and he half knelt on the ground with a plop. Even though Ji Guang had experienced life and death, he was still covered in cold sweat. Tai Hu was the only expert he had met in his life, and he took his life in one move. Now that he thought about it, no matter how he thought about it, it was terrifying. When he raised his head again, he realized that there was still candlelight in the village pavilion. At this moment, Ji Guang suddenly felt old and tired. In his position, he was prominent in front of others, but who knew how fearful he was when there was no one around? He, who had just experienced a life and death situation, wanted to have a good rest. The village gazing pavilion seemed to be his final resting place. Ji Guang dragged his bleeding leg and slowly walked towards the village gazing house. Then, he gently knocked on the door, which was so loud in the quiet street. Ji Guang was just an abbreviation. On this night, more than 10 eunuchs with official positions who were taking shifts outside the palace were dealt with in various ways. Some were injured in the arms, some in the legs. Some even had their hair shaved off in their sleep without knowing it. This was Yang Chendong's warning. Any eunuch who dared to call himself a eunuch and was not a eunuch would be punished. The first time was a warning, but whether or not the next time would be to take someone's life, no one would know. The next morning, Chen Guan followed the plan he had discussed with Ji Guang the day before and prepared to call for a meeting. He called a few eunuch leaders here to discuss how to suppress Yang Chendong. But before he could send out the order to summon the eunuchs, more than 10 pieces of information arrived. By the time all the information was delivered to him, Chen Guan was already drenched in cold sweat. He hadn't expected that someone would move even faster than him. How did they do it? Yesterday, the 10-odd eunuchs who were taking shifts outside the palace were living in different parts of the capital, doing different things, but they were all suddenly attacked. What did this mean? It meant that a large net had been watching them for a long time, and they were just waiting for the right time to strike. If it hadn't happened, even Chen Guan wouldn't have believed it. He had thought about the consequences of offending Yang Chendong and made some preparations, but now it seemed that if the other party really wanted to kill him, it wouldn't be difficult. When a person felt that their life was in the hands of others at any time, it was a very bad feeling. Chen Guan was like this now. He didn't want to call for a meeting, but when he found out about Ji Guang's whereabouts, he went straight to village pavilion. Ji Guang was one of the top experts in the embroidered uniform guards, and he had personally experienced the feeling of being attacked last night. It was probably the most direct and effective to ask him how he felt. When Chen Guan brought a group of trusted aides to village pavilion, Ji Guang was resting in bed in Li Xiuer's boudoir upstairs. But no matter how one looked at Li Xiuer, she was glowing, giving people the feeling of a new life. No one knew that last night, Ji Guang had thought it through and wanted Li Xiuer, and the two of them were officially together. At this moment, Chen Guan rushed over, and all he got was Ji Guang's dissuasion. Chen Guan rushed into village pavilion with a group of embroidered uniform guards, giving Li Xiuer a fright. Fortunately, Ji Guang took her hand in time and squeezed it gently to comfort her. His eyes were full of gentleness when he looked at Li Xiao, but when he looked up and saw the other embroidered uniform guards in flying suits rushing in, his expression didn't look good at all. All of you, leave first. The group of embroidered uniform guards looked at Chen Guan hesitantly, not knowing what to do. They were here to protect Eunuch Chen. If they left like this and something really happened, they were afraid that none of them would have a good ending. With Ji Qianxia here, you all can leave for now. Chen Guan saw Ji Guang's displeasure and thought that this person's skills were extraordinary, so he nodded in agreement. The group of embroidered uniform guards left the room, and Ji Guang said to Li Xiao affectionately, "Yes, Hen, leave for now. I have something to say to this lord." "Okay, but don't stand up. The wound on your leg has just stopped bleeding." Li Xiao nodded obediently, but a trace of worry still appeared on her face. Chapter 230. I will. Ji Guang chuckled and watched Li Xiao leave the room. Chen Guan's concerned voice sounded. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" "Yes, I'm hurt. The other party didn't intend to take my life. Otherwise, I'm afraid I would have died last night." Speaking of this, Ji Guang's mood was very calm, as if he was narrating something that had nothing to do with him. But these words were so deafening in Chen Guan's ears. "Who did it? Even you are no match for them?" "Yes, I'm not that person's opponent. Even if I was on guard, even if I brought a few subordinates, he could still easily kill me." Speaking of this, Ji Guang's mood became a little depressed. After all, in his strongest aspect, he had to admit that he was inferior to the other party. This made him feel unreconciled. But whether he was convinced or not, the reality was like this. He was indeed not Tai Hu's opponent. He couldn't even withstand one move. Feeling that Ji Guang's tone seemed to be disheartened, Chen Guan asked tentatively, "Was it that person who did it?" Sigh. A long sigh. After what happened last night, Ji Guang thought it through and accepted it. Yang Chendong was not someone he could afford to offend. Moreover, this person ignored the law and acted extremely decisively and ruthlessly. He hadn't expected to make a move on his own accord, so he hadn't been on guard at all. Of course, if such an opponent was bent on targeting you, what could you do even if you were prepared? Forget it, Eunuch Chen. Some people are destined to be beyond our ability to deal with. If we have to force it, I'm afraid we will lose our lives." After being silent for a long time, Ji Guang said such words that Chen Guan could not believe. "You? Are you afraid?" Chen Guan did not believe that the always confident and arrogant Ji Guang would bow his head one day, and so completely. "Yes, I'm afraid," Ji Guang admitted frankly. "If that person wants to kill me, he can do it at any time. Tell me, Eunuch Chen, facing such an opponent, what do you want me to do? Would he continue to oppose that person until he lost his life? This time, he's targeting me. I'm afraid he'll harm Eunuch Chen next time. Listen to me and let go." Knowing that Ji Guang still didn't know what had happened to the other eunuchs, Chen Guan let out a long breath and said, "Actually, he didn't just target you. Just last night, there were 13 steward eunuchs who were targeted. If they were injured, if their lives were threatened." "What?" Ji Guang, who was half lying on the bed, suddenly stood up. He stared at Chen Guan and asked, "Is what Eunuch Chen said true?" "I'm not lying to you." Chen Guan shook his head, his eyes filled with disappointment. Especially when he thought about how he had gone to the Yang family village to denounce them yesterday, he felt that it was so ridiculous. The other party had already made preparations and was just waiting for them to rush forward. They were so confused that they actually did as they were told. It was no wonder that they were scared and threatened. Chen Guan admitted it. This gave Ji Guang a big fright. His mind spun slightly, as if he had thought of something. He asked, "Eunuch Chen, where is he right now?" Although he didn't mention his name, Chen Guan still understood what Ji Guang meant. He replied, I just received news that he went to Chicken Crow Mountain yesterday afternoon. Went to Chicken Crow Mountain? Who went with him? Are the servants who usually follow him here? Thinking of a possibility, Ji Guang asked aloud. They're all there. Even the mercenaries guarding the Yang family bank, the immortal abode, and the sky beyond heaven are all there. They didn't do anything strange. Qin Guan said this somewhat painfully. His face turned even uglier. Hiss. When Ji Ning heard this, he also sucked in a cold breath. Yang Qindong had gone to Chicken Crow Mountain. This was to create an alibi for him. With a group of subordinates by his side, the others had no choice but to forcibly separate him from the attack on the eunuchs last night. But this was the most frightening thing. If those people were still standing there, it could only mean one thing. After leaving the capital, the Duke of Loyalty still had people he could use, and they were people they didn't know existed. Last night, it had been these people who had attacked. The mercenaries were already very frightening. Now, an unknown and mysterious force had appeared. How could they not be shocked? When he thought about how there was probably a pair of eyes watching his every move, Ji Guang couldn't help but shiver, and then he shook his head. Forget it, Eunuch Chen. Listen to this official's advice and let him go. We'll tell Eunuch Jean the situation and let him beat and punish him. As for what he wants to do, that's his business. As for us, we'll just obediently stay here. What? But if we do that, Jining will inevitably look down on us, Qin Guan immediately retorted when he heard that Ji Guang was admitting defeat. So what if he looks down on us? It's better than losing his life. Besides, we gave him all of Wang Zhen's treasures, so we've done a great service. Even if we put on a show for others, he won't touch us right now. Ji Guang shook his head. He knew that after making this decision, the chances of him being put in an important position were extremely small. But when he thought about Yang Qindong's various tricks, he suddenly felt that he was invincible. Ji Guang's words echoed in Qin Guan's ears, and after thinking for a long time, he finally made his decision. Fine. You rest and recover. I'll go and speak with Eunuch Jean. Qin Guan left, and not long after, he went to the palace to see Jining. He gave her a detailed account of what had happened yesterday afternoon and last night. In the end, he stated his own judgment that the Duke of Loyalty still had a mysterious force in the capital that they couldn't see. This force was so powerful that they couldn't deal with it. Jining had just received Wang Zhen's silver and was in a good mood. But when he heard Qin Guan's report, his face paled again and again. He suddenly recalled the result of his agreement with Yang Qindong. They had agreed to mind their own business, but now, Yang Qindong had broken the agreement. If there really was such a mysterious force that suddenly wanted to target him, what would he do? Jining had just obtained great authority, so he needed to properly enjoy it. He didn't want to die at this moment. Thus, he quickly made his decision. Forget it. Since the Duke of Loyalty has Wang Zhen's receipt, we'll let this matter rest. In addition, without this Duke's permission, you went to make trouble for the Duke of Loyalty. Since you were the ones who provoked this matter, you should resolve it yourselves. In short, we need to keep the peace. I don't want to see anyone injured or even killed because of this. Jining shamelessly pushed all the blame onto Qin Guan and Ji Guang, choosing to stay out of the matter. Qin Guan sighed in relief that he would no longer pursue the matter of the silver, but he was also put in a very difficult position when he had to apologize. Eunuch Jean, is the Duke of Loyalty at Chicken Crow Mountain? Should we wait for him to come back? There's no need to wait. Some things should be resolved as soon as possible. How about this, you and Ji Guang immediately go to Chicken Crow Mountain. You must have a good attitude and be sincere. Do you understand? Jining didn't want any accidents to happen when he left the palace, so he wanted to resolve the matter as soon as possible. Qin Guan left with a disheartened expression. After he left, there was a ban in the palace that spread among the group of eunuchs. In the future, no matter which eunuch they were, they had to address themselves as this duke instead of this duke. Otherwise, they would have to bear the consequences. Chicken Crow Mountain. It was the end of autumn, and early winter was about to arrive. The leaves on the mountain were beginning to turn yellow, giving people a very bleak feeling. However, this didn't stop Hu Yan and Xiao Yin's interest. They arranged for people to bring out the meat skewers and all kinds of food that they had brought. Then, they lit a fire, causing the air in the area to become much warmer. In response, Yang Chendong watched from the side without any intention of interfering. He liked to see his women happy. In his opinion, this was one of the goals he pursued. If he wanted the people to be happy, he first had to let his family be happy. Then, it would be the happiness of the entire Han people. With the experience from last time, Hu Yan and Xiao Yin were able to command the troops in an orderly manner. Yang Chendong didn't have to do any skewers like last time. He only needed to sit and enjoy the success. When the sky slowly darkened, the bonfire lit up the sky. Hu Yan and Xiao Yin had also prepared everything. Just as they were about to call Lu Lang to enjoy with them, Tiger's Mane walked over. "Young master, Chen Guan and Ji Guang are here." "So fast?" Yang Chendong, who had been prepared for this, was still somewhat curious when he heard that the two had rushed over in just a little more than a day. "Yes, there are also 30 embroidered uniform guards. Among them, Ji Guang was carried over." Tiger's Mane continued to explain the situation. Let them wait outside. This young master will go and see them in a while." Yang Chendong casually waved his hand. Since they had done something wrong, they should have the attitude of admitting their mistakes. Leaving them out for a while was just training. After sending away Tiger's Mane, Yang Chendong followed Hu Yan and Xiao Yin to the bonfire. Everyone was waiting for them here. Outside, a few members of Cold Front were closely watching Chen Guan and Ji Guang's group. They had already been waiting here for nearly 2 hours. The weather at this time would become cold at night. The two of them didn't bring any warm clothing, so they felt a little cold. However, they could only endure it. This time, they were here to admit their mistakes. They weren't here to collect debts like yesterday. Chapter 231. A head eunuch of the Imperial Horse Directorate and a commander of the Embroidered Uniform Guard. Normally, they were lofty figures, but right now, they were like children who had done something wrong, waiting for the adults to forgive them. On the other side, Yang Chendong was gargling his mouth after eating and drinking to his heart's content, while listening to Tiger's Man's report on the information he received during the day. "Oh, so Wolf's Man and the others did well?" "Yes, they did very well. The process was clean and efficient." According to Yang San, it was beyond his expectations, Tiger's Man replied in a low voice. "Very good. Give them a collective third-class merit." Yang Chendong chuckled, then spat out the last mouthful of water in his mouth. "Are they still waiting?" "They're waiting. Without the young master's permission, they wouldn't dare leave." Tiger's Man's face lit up with joy. Even though he hadn't been the one to do it, seeing Chen Guan and the others lower their heads still made him happy. A hint of a smile flashed across Yang Chendong's face. Some people were just like that. They didn't want to be nice to others, and insisted on being beaten up before they knew what pain was. Forget it. It's already been 2 hours. It's getting dark, and they probably didn't bring any blankets. We can't keep them here for the night and then give them their things, can we? Tiger's Man nodded in agreement. That's right. We'll just let them dry for a while. As for blankets and whatnot, we don't have any extra. Haha. Yang Chendong laughed heartily. Then, Tiger's Man and Beta Persei led the way to where Chen Guan and Ji Guang were. No one knew what they talked about when they met. However, those who were observant noticed one thing. The embroidered uniform guard that had been standing guard outside the Immortal Abode street had all disappeared. In their place were the soldiers of the warden's office. It was also from this time onwards that everyone really managed to keep to themselves on the surface. The Immortal Abode was still packed to the brim, and the Beyond Heaven's Gate was also bustling with activity. Batch after batch of rare goods were being sent out from the gate to different locations. People were walking around the Yang family bank, either depositing or withdrawing money. Everything was done in an orderly manner. Time passed by 1449, and it was the Spring Festival of 1450. The Spring Festival of the Great Ming Dynasty was the busiest time of the year, and it was also the time for families to reunite. The entire capital was bustling with activity. Even the commoners were like this, let alone the people in the palace. As the emperor, not only did he have to reward his subjects for their hard work over the past year, he also had to receive many foreign diplomatic missions. This was especially true for the Great Ming Dynasty, which was a grand and powerful country. There were many vassal states and countries that didn't want to be conquered. Every year during the new year, they would send envoys to pay tribute to show their submission or respect. This year was also Zhu Qiu's first time as emperor. In order to show their respect, the diplomatic missions from many countries were much larger than in previous years. For a period of time, it was common to see people in strange attire in the capital. The population of the capital was rapidly increasing, and the number of consumers was increasing by the day. The business of the merchants was getting better and better, and more shops were opening. The shops that Yang Qindong had bought at a low price were rented out. Even though the prices were a little higher, they were still in short supply, allowing him to make a small profit. The capital began to prosper once more. This was the scene of a peaceful era. Places like the Immortal Abode, which were usually bustling with activity, were now even more difficult to find. This was especially true after the drama of the war between the war god and the Walla, which attracted even more praise. Anyone who saw this drama felt their blood boil, and even after leaving the Immortal Abode, they were still talking about it. At this time, it was time for Dai Zong to summon soldiers, and because of this, many people were seeking to join him. The Great Ming's military was primarily supported by military households. The so-called military households were born soldiers. Your father was a soldier. After becoming a military household, as long as you gave birth to a son, he would have to become a soldier when he grew up. This also ensured that the number of soldiers in the army would reach a stable level. However, the Battle of Tumu Fortress and Shihang's defeat had severely damaged the army, and its numbers were severely lacking. In these circumstances, Dai Zong, Zhu Qiu, issued the order for the first conscription after taking the throne. He had originally believed that the treatment of soldiers was poor, and that there wouldn't be many who wanted to join the army, perhaps even a few. He had never imagined that the drama in the Immortal Abode would cause many young people, and even a few scholars, to join the army. When the news got out, it caused an uproar among the nobles. The Great Ming despised the military and emphasized the scholarly, even suppressing the military. The treatment and status of soldiers in society had always been extremely low. But now, there were scholars joining the army. Although it could be said that these scholars didn't have much of a future, for them to join the army was still a loss of face for scholars. Because of this, some proud literati hated Yang Qindong to the point that they even hated him. They believed that it was because of the drama in the Immortal Abode that this had happened, and that he was the main culprit. He had brought shame to all the scholars in the world. But just as they were discussing this, the Yang clan manor suddenly opened a Yang clan academy. To outsiders, it was said that the loyal and courageous duke had nothing better to do, and wanted to experience the feeling of teaching and educating people. But in reality, only he knew that this was for the future development of the Yangxia Academy. Even though there were many advanced books in Crimson City, they had all been forcefully instilled by Yang Qindong. Without coming into contact with them, seeing them, or even understanding the principles behind them, it was difficult for them to make any progress. This gave young Master Yang the idea of nurturing talents and sending them to Crimson City. This was something he had no choice but to do. With Yang Qindong's current status and the schemes he had set up, it was impossible for him to leave the capital. Now was not the time for him to leave the capital and the center of power of the Great Ming Dynasty. Since he could not return to Crimson City, he naturally could not go back to impart knowledge. His only choice was to find talents in the capital and impart knowledge to them. With the scholars joining the army and the sudden opening of the Yang Clan Academy, the Yang Clan manor instantly became the focus of all the scholars' condemnation. Some people even dug up Yang Qindong's history, claiming that he had only been an elementary scholar and that even his status as a high scholar had been bestowed upon him by Emperor Ing. Perhaps he had some literary talent, knew how to do business, and even knew a little about the art of war. But when it came to opening an academy, he was far too lacking. One had to know that those who were able to open an academy had to have sufficient knowledge to do so. It was not something that could be done by a random brat. There were many voices of opposition. Similarly, there were many supporters. Because of Yang Qindong, many of his books were published, and he was hailed as the #1 prodigy of the younger generation. In addition, he had composed many new songs, earning him the title of Eastern Commander. He had saved Emperor Ing, defeated Walla, and protected the position of Emperor Dai. This caused his fame to soar, and he had many admirers in the army. How could such a person lack supporters? If this was in the future, Yang Qindong could probably create a Weibo account and have tens of millions of fans in just a few minutes. There were supporters, but there were also opponents. The matter became more and more serious. Eventually, the matter reached the imperial court and reached Zhu Qiyu, the acting sect master. Zhu Qizhen had some headaches about Yang Qindong. Although this person was an official, due to his young age, he didn't seem to have the awareness of being an official. He had once been conferred the title of General of Agile Cavalry, which was equivalent to a second-rank official, but he had never attended the royal court. It was even very difficult for him, the emperor, to see him. In his own words, he was still young and too playful. He would talk about politics in the royal court later. Given that Yang Qindong's actions were always unexpected, Zhu Qiyu agreed to his request. After all, he was also worried that this person would cause trouble today and tomorrow, causing headaches. However, he didn't expect that even if he didn't enter the royal court, he would still be able to cause trouble. It was like setting up a Yang family academy. You don't do good business, but learn the elegance of a scholar. Isn't this looking for trouble? Zhu Qiyu had a headache. In the royal court, there were people loudly criticizing, but there were also many officials who lowered their heads in silence to show their support. He couldn't help but feel a little headache. My beloved subjects, the Duke of Loyalty and Courage has only opened an academy. As far as I know, he didn't recruit many people, only 50. This doesn't seem to be a big deal. Why do you need to bring it up to the imperial court? Your Majesty, that's not right. As soon as Zhu Qiyu's voice fell, an old official stepped out from the crowd. He held a ceremonial tablet in his hand and had a serious and nervous expression on his face. Teaching and educating people is something that can only be done if there are great scholars and virtuous practitioners. Although Duke Zhongdan is quite good in other aspects, he is only a scholar. How can he take on such an important task? The person who spoke was called He Wenyuan. His courtesy name was Juchuan, and his title was Dongyuan. He was also called Dunan, and he was from Xujiang town in Guangchang County. He Wenyuan was knowledgeable and well-versed in astronomy and geography. He was very talented in writing and was good at poetry. His works included Dongyuan Ji, Yiting Sun, 4 books lecture, Records of Rights and Explanations, Dunan Memorial, Herdsman's Spare Book, Criminal Magistrate's Spare Book, and so on. At that time, he was the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel. His appearance represented the attitude of the literati. It was a rejection of Yang Qindong's so-called Yang Academy. Speaking of which, Yang Qindong came from a famous family. He was the youngest son of Yang Rong, one of the 3 Yangs. He had also become a scholar at a young age, so he should have been a model scholar. However, he chose to be a merchant in place of an official and led the army into battle. He went from a literati to a semi-martial person and obtained the position of duke. He became a duke before the age of 20. This made many people envious, and many people secretly refused to accept it. They only thought that if they had the chance, they would teach Yang Qindong a lesson and teach him a lesson. After all, a person who reached the peak before the age of 20 that many people would never be able to reach in their lifetime would have such a mentality. Chapter 232. He had always been jealous, but he had lacked an opportunity to ignite it. Now that Yang Chendong was going to open an academy, he Wen Yuan, as one of the great scholars, had to express his stance. That's right, that's right. With someone stepping forward, many of the civil officials nodded their heads in agreement, clearly showing their support for He Wen Yuan. The reason why so many of the officials stood up to oppose Yang Chendong was not only because of jealousy, but also because of the rules of scholars. Did scholars have rules? Of course they did. Every profession had its own rules, and anyone who wanted to break them would have to pay a heavy price. It was normal for scholars to open academies to teach and educate people. Not only could he promote his name, but he could also take the opportunity to recruit more students, expand his influence, and also collect a lot of money. This was a typical way for scholars to make a fortune. However, because of this, not everyone could open an academy. If one did not have a certain amount of social influence or was not recognized by the group of scholars, opening an academy would only cause them to be criticized, because the scholars would not allow such a thing to happen. Otherwise, if anyone could open an academy, where would they be able to make a living? Whether it was out of jealousy or wanting to maintain their own status and influence, in short, if Yang Chendong wanted to get involved in the matter of starting an academy, they would definitely stop him. He Wen Yuan stood up, and then several influential civil officials stood up to express their opposition. Zhu Qiyu, who was sitting on the dragon throne, narrowed his eyes into a line. He knew how powerful the civil officials were, and he knew that deep down, these scholars looked down on him. This was the disadvantage of only respecting Confucianism. This was because once upon a time, the founders of the great Ming dynasty had also been rejected by the scholars. It was only because the great saber and great stick were too powerful that they had no choice but to lower their heads. In fact, in the changing of dynasties, there were very few emperors who were truly recognized by the scholars. On the contrary, in their hearts, the true orthodox was Confucius's Kong family. That was their pilgrimage ground. With the change of dynasties, countless emperors fell from their horses, countless scholars were killed, and countless commoners were displaced from place to place. But no matter how one looked at it, the Kong clan had always stood strong. The Kong family was the epitome of a man's ability to submit and stand tall. The Mongols came to visit the Mongols, and the Manchus came to visit the Manchus. Li Zicheng had just entered Shandong and was still far away from Cifu when he shouted, "Long live Emperor Yongchang." When Yuan Shikai proclaimed himself emperor, he said, "Ascend the throne as soon as possible to comfort the people." Zhang Sun was overjoyed after his restoration. Let the whole world celebrate. In 1937, before the Japanese army invaded China, Kong Dicheng, the sage Duke of Yensheng, had a great interest in poetry. He advocated that China and Japan were of the same language and the same kind. The poem said, "Rivers, rivers, rivers, pearls, and streams are the same. How could there be different people in the same province?" This was a little confusing. Were you trying to express goodwill to the locust army? The longevity of the Kong clan was even greater than that of the imperial family. It was even a holy land for scholars in the world. Even the emperor sometimes had to look at his face when doing things. Just like Zhu Qiyu, in history, in order to make his son Zhu Jianji the crown prince, he actually bribed the officials of the imperial court. In the history books, the scholars of the imperial court received a special reward from the emperor, 50 taels of gold and double the amount of silver. Why would the Jingtai emperor, Zhu Qiyu, want to reward the officials? It turned out that the reward this time was actually a bribe. The Jingtai emperor wanted to use the reward to shut the mouths of the officials, to keep their mouths shut. This was why the Minister of Personnel, Wang Zhi, looked at the gold and silver rewarded by the emperor and stamped his feet. He said, "What is this? I am ashamed to death." Even the emperor sometimes had to look at the faces of scholars, not to mention Yang Chendong wanting to establish an academy. With his status and qualifications, it was normal for him to be opposed and reprimanded by everyone. However, Yang Chendong had just made a great contribution and was given the title of Duke of Loyalty and Courage. Moreover, he was stripped of all his other powers. At this moment, how could Zhu Qiyu make irresponsible remarks to him? Since the scholars weren't willing to let him establish an academy, he'd just let the scholars handle it. Thinking of this, his expression relaxed a lot. As for the matter of Zhonghua opening the Yang Family Academy, we still need to consider it carefully. Of course, if there are any officials who disagree, you can go and reason with them. This is also a way to promote the culture of our great Ming dynasty. Zhu Qiyu didn't say that he was against it, but he also didn't say that he was for it. If you have the ability, go find the Duke of Loyalty and Courage yourselves. This was also Zhu Qiyu's answer. With the emperor's words, He Wenyuan and the others immediately beamed with joy. They were worried that the emperor would agree. If that was the case, they would be going against the emperor's will if they went to the Yang clan manor. This could be used against them by the embroidered uniform guards and the Eastern faction guards. But now that they had the emperor's decree, they could do things with fewer misgivings. Immortal Abode. The streets were bustling with people and carriages, vividly displaying the prosperity of the capital. The Immortal Abode, where the world's best delicacies and best services were gathered, the sky beyond heaven, where all the world's rare treasures were gathered, and the Yang clan's bank had mountains of gold and silver. Because of this, the entire street was bustling with activity. If anyone who came to the capital didn't come here to take a look, they would be too embarrassed to say that they had ever been to the capital. This place had already become a symbol of the capital. This was especially true for the entrance to the Immortal Abode. Ever since breakfast, it had been packed with people. By the time the performance started, there wasn't a single empty seat to be seen. As the number of members increased by the day, it was becoming increasingly difficult to reserve a seat in advance. If even the members were like this, there was no need to mention the visitors. As the new year approached, more and more foreign ambassadors arrived. When they wanted to taste the delicacies here, they had no choice but to line up with the common folk of the great Ming dynasty. Even though most of those who could come here wore silk robes and had a certain level of status, it was still viewed as an insult to the common folk to line up with them. There had been a number of ministers who had disagreed on this matter. They said that the foreign ambassadors should be given special treatment to express the magnanimity of the great Ming dynasty. But Emperor Daizong had sent these memorials to Yang Chendong. The Immortal Abode was his place, so the decision was naturally up to Yang Chendong. Yang Chendong had only memorized the names of the people who had written these memorials, but he hadn't read their contents in detail. Why did foreign ambassadors have to be superior to others? Worshipping foreigners was a sign of weakness deep in one's bones. Since Yang Chendong had come, he would never allow such a thing to happen. Treating everyone equally was already extremely benevolent. If it weren't for the fact that he needed to earn money from the foreign ambassadors right now, he would have already issued an order that only Han citizens were allowed to enter. Yang Chendong's indifference meant that the foreign ambassadors who wanted to enter the Immortal Abode had no choice but to line up. Even though they were full of grievances and had expressions of displeasure, when they knew that the rules couldn't be changed, there were still people who came to line up outside the Immortal Abode. Today, there was a woman in the line with an indifferent expression. She was indeed an astonishingly beautiful woman. She was dressed in the women's clothing of the great Ming dynasty. Her skin was as white as snow, and her eyes were as bright as the moon. In particular, her exquisite facial features made men's hearts itch. Speaking of which, this woman had quite the background. She wasn't actually a citizen of the great Ming dynasty, but rather a Japanese who lived at sea. Her name was Ohara Junko. Among the many people in the queue, Ohara Junko was undoubtedly an angel. Her appearance also made some of the men who were originally shouting in the queue shut their mouths. It seemed that they all wanted to leave a good impression in front of such a beauty. Junko was also protected by a few guards who weren't very tall, but had cold eyes. This only served to highlight her noble status. Her identity was truly not simple. Junko's father was Hito, the current emperor of the Inner Garden of Japan. She had come to the capital of the great Ming dynasty to broaden her horizons and seek opportunities. Hito was the emperor of the Muromachi period, the 102nd emperor. He had ascended the throne on September 7, 1428. He was the great-grandson of Emperor Hito, the son of Prince Fushimi Masayoshi, and the adopted son of Emperor Gokomatsu. He was also known as the Emperor of the Inner Garden. During the reign of the Emperor of the Inner Garden, not only was there a rebellion between two Achiki and Kaji, the dissatisfied people of the Southern Dynasty were also rioting, causing the political situation to become unstable. In addition, General Ashikaga Yoshimasa lived a life of luxury and enjoyed himself. His power was immense, and the emperor had to reprimand him. It was precisely because the domestic situation was unstable that the Emperor of the Inner Garden wanted to find a way out from outside. This time, when he heard that the new emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty defeated the elite cavalry of Walla, he sent an envoy with the intention of strengthening the relationship between the two countries and seeking some help. Junko came with the envoy for another purpose. According to the Emperor of the Inner Garden, if his daughter could be married to the Emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty, then he would have a powerful foreign aid, and at that time, his words in Japan would be much more powerful. In order to achieve this goal, the appearance of his daughter Junko was still a secret. At least before the matter was settled, it was not suitable to spread it out and attract the attention of other forces in the country. But now, Junko appeared in public so calmly because her matter had already come to an end. That was, the acting emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty had a new empress and more than a dozen concubines. It was difficult for her to find a suitable position to intervene now. Moreover, her son was too young and was still in his infancy. In any case, it was impossible for him to marry Junko and form an alliance with Japan. Chapter 233. It was precisely because she couldn't achieve her goal that Junko had decided to openly dress as a woman and walk out from the group of Japanese envoys. She had also heard that the immortal abode had delicious delicacies that couldn't be found outside, as well as joyous music and dancing. Her curiosity had been piqued, and she wanted to see what was going on. Junko had inherited her parents' strengths, and although she was only 15 years old, she was like the brightest star in the crowd. No one could ignore her even if they wanted to. Important news, important news. The Duke of Zhongdan has opened the Yang Clan Academy, and this has incurred the displeasure of some of the officials. Just a moment ago, the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, He Wenyuan, led a dozen Confucian scholars and officials to the Yang Clan manor to demand an explanation. An earth-shattering shout suddenly came from the crowd, causing many of the men who had been paying attention to Junko to change their minds. Who was Yang Chendong? There was no need for an introduction. There was no one here who didn't know him. Whether it was the immortal abode, the sky beyond heaven, or the Yang Clan Bank, they were all his handiwork. This was the idol of many young people, and now, someone was going to cause trouble for him. This was definitely big news, and a rare occurrence. When the crowd heard the news, they all rushed toward the southern part of the city. They wanted to see how the Dong Shui would deal with He Wenyuan and the other Confucian scholars. At this moment, not only did the line outside shrink, many of the diners who had been eating in the immortal abode also walked out, causing the originally crowded street to become much emptier. With so many people leaving, those who remained were particularly conspicuous. Among them were Junko and several of her guards. Little Lin Kuan, did they go to see the Dong Shui? Junko's crisp voice rang out in somewhat awkward Chinese. Among the guards, a young man with a mustache was originally looking around with a serious expression. When he heard Junko's voice, he immediately turned around and nodded. Princess, they really did go to see the Dong Shui. According to the information we received, the Dong Shui is not in the capital, but in the Yang Clan Manor 15 li south of the city. The Yang Clan Manor? Junko also wants to go take a look. With a trace of desire in her eyes, Junko said in a moving voice. This. Shaolin hesitated when he heard the princess' request. In the capital, the princess's safety was guaranteed, but once she left this place, he truly didn't dare to guarantee anything. Not hearing Kobayashi's exact answer, Junko's face flashed an innocent smile. What's wrong? Could it be that Shaolin Kuan had no confidence in his own strength? My father has said that little Lin Kuan is one of the best of the younger generation in Japan. Even my father's guards are not much stronger than you. Junko's affirmative voice reached Kobayashi's ears. His body suddenly straightened, and at this moment, he seemed to have become much taller. Well, since the princess is interested, Kobayashi will certainly fulfill her wish. Then let's set off now. Alright, thank you for your hard work, Korean-kun. After her brilliant plan succeeded, Junko's face returned to normal, as if she wasn't the girl who was begging just now. Outside the Yang Manor, He Wenyuan and several other great scholars were standing in the square 50 meters away from the manor. None of them were wearing official robes. Obviously, they were going to question Yang Qindong in an unofficial capacity. It wasn't that He Wenyuan and the others didn't know how to oppress others. On the contrary, it was precisely because they knew about Yang Qindong's achievements and knew that he was the Duke of Loyalty and Courage that they gave up showing themselves as officials. In fact, with their status, they really couldn't make Yang Qindong take the initiative to make any concessions. Yang Si and Yang Lu were standing 50 meters away from He Wenyuan and the others. They stared at everything in front of them, looking at the great scholars and the sea of people behind them. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a sea of people. With a rough estimate, there were more than 1,000 people who came to watch the show. When they were all gathered there, the official road was already crowded with people. Even those who came later to watch the show had to stand by the roadside and the ditches. Since this place became the Yang Manor, it hadn't been so lively. Even when Yang Qindong got married, although there were many guests, there weren't more than 1,000. It was unexpectedly so lively this time. Naturally, Yang Si and Yang Lu, who were responsible for the security of the outer court, were a little nervous. Among the crowd, Junko also came here under the protection of Shaolin and the others. It had to be said that in many cases, the use of money was still very great. When Shaolin took out some broken silver, he quickly let some people of the great Ming dynasty who came early to watch the show give up the best position. This also allowed Junko to stand in the most advantageous position and watch the battle between the scholars of this foreign country. He Wenyuan and the others came very early, but they weren't in a hurry to say anything. They were waiting for more witnesses to embarrass Yang Qindong. Now that the people had gathered, He Wenyuan and the others looked at each other and reached an agreement. In the end, it was the left assistant minister who stepped forward and said to Yang Si and Yang Lu, who were 50 meters away, "Is the Duke of Zhongdan so arrogant? We have been here for half a day, why haven't we seen him? Could it be that he is afraid?" Afraid? How could our family's duke be afraid of scholars like you? Yang Si's eyes had a hint of ridicule as he stepped forward. Our family's duke is busy every day and has a lot of things to do. He doesn't have time to waste on you. If you don't have anything important to say, please go back. How could He Wenyuan, a great scholar, look good when he was despised by a scholar? But in the end, he had been an official for many years, and his face had long been trained. His anger only lasted for a moment, and he quickly calmed down and asked back, "You said that we are scholars, but does the Duke of Zhongdan look down on all scholars in the world?" Yang Si's face darkened when he was suddenly countered with a slip of the tongue. He wanted to refute something, but he didn't know where to start. After all, fighting with his fists was his forte, and in terms of talking, he was far inferior to the few Confucians. Seeing that Yang Si's face was burning with anger, but he didn't know how to answer, He Wenyuan looked up to the sky and roared, as if he had already won and done something satisfying. "The Duke has arrived." At this moment, a thunderous shout sounded. Yang Qindong, dressed in green and holding a folding fan, approached from afar under the protection of Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and the others. Although it was only a seemingly casual green robe, as Yang Qindong's footsteps continued to approach, a wave of pressure swept over He Wenyuan and the other great scholars. Even the commoners who were closer to them to watch the show felt a sense of oppression. It was as if they were not facing a group of people, but a prehistoric divine beast. Yang Qindong was always like this, giving different people different feelings. As a friend, he was as warm as the sun; as an enemy, he was as happy to suppress them like a storm. When did this duke say that he looked down on scholars? Scholars are a part of this society, just like farmers, merchants, and workers. They can all create value and contribute to the progress of this society. They are all worthy of respect. Before he even arrived, his voice was already heard. It was just one sentence, but it attracted loud cheers from the people who were watching the commotion. Most of the people who came to watch the show were farmers, merchants, and workers. Yang Chendong's words had attracted everyone's consensus, and he had instantly changed his role and become the spokesperson of these people. How could it not arouse everyone's good feelings? However, He Wenyuan and the others who heard this sentence also had ugly expressions on their faces. Regardless of whether others could hear it or not, they heard it very clearly. That was, this loyal duke had compared farmers, merchants, workers, and scholars. Just from this point alone, it was inevitable that they would feel dissatisfied. During the Great Ming Dynasty, not everyone could go to school, nor did they have the opportunity to. Firstly, the cost of studying was high, and it was necessary to hire good teachers to teach, which required money. Secondly, scholars also paid attention to the difference in family background. If one did not have a good family background, even if one went to school and did not have a recommendation, it would be difficult for one to have a bright future. Often, one could only write letters for others and work as an accountant. That was also very difficult to be looked down upon. Thirdly, the proportion of scholars who eventually became a shiozai, an imperial scholar, or an official was relatively small. Many people might have studied for a lifetime, but it would be difficult for them to become a shiozai until they died. It was a waste of money and time, and there might not be a good result. This made most of the people unable to bear it. There were statistics in the history books, and the proportion of scholars in the Great Ming Dynasty was less than 1%. In other words, it was difficult to find one scholar in 100 people, which made their status even more noble. Yang Chendong classified them as ordinary people, so it was no wonder they were angry and did not give him a good face. Loyal Duke? This official knows that you are good with words, and I also know that you have some talent, especially in storytelling, which is beyond the reach of ordinary people. However, establishing an academy is not something that can be done by relying on a few absurd stories. That will only mislead the students, do you understand? He Wenyuan cleverly did not argue with Yang Chendong about the status of scholars. Instead, he went straight to the point, saying that Yang Chendong's ability was limited, and that he was not qualified for such a big matter as opening an academy. This official does not know. Yang Chendong waited for He Wenyuan's voice to fall, and straightforwardly shook his head. This official only knows that teaching and educating people is a matter of great virtue. Being able to let the common people of the world know more words, and understand more knowledge, is the way of the good. In order to achieve this goal, this duke's teaching will not charge a single copper coin for tuition, and 2 meals will be provided. If the student is talented, this duke will recommend a suitable position for him or her, so that he or she can bring honor to his or her ancestors and family. Chapter 234. Wow! As soon as Yang Chendong's voice fell, there was a burst of exclamations from the crowd. Teaching without charging a single coin for tuition and taking care of food was something that no school or teacher could do. Those who were ambitious would not be able to meet this requirement because their own strength did not allow them to. Those who were strong would not have such thoughts. They would rather earn more money. How could they work for nothing and have to pay for food? It was because of this contradiction that Yang Chendong's words made everyone so surprised, but at the same time, they were also very excited. Some of the young people from poor families could not help but think that if this was really the case, then could they consider entering the Yang Academy to learn some skills? He Wenyuan also did not expect Yang Chendong to do this. For a moment, he was also stunned by these words. He stood there for a long time and did not say anything. It was not until someone next to him whispered something that he suddenly realized something. He looked at Yang Chendong with a mocking expression and said, "Duke of loyalty and courage, this official knows that you are very good at doing business, but teaching people knowledge is not teaching them to do business. That is to see the real thing, do you know?" Ha ha ha. He Wenyuan's words attracted the laughter of his companions. They all looked at Yang Chendong with disdain. It was as if they were saying that he was a businessman and the students he taught were only businessmen. How could he be considered a real scholar? How could he be recognized by the scholars of the world? The mocking voices of these people did not move Yang Qindong at all. He even laughed. Ha ha ha, who said that this duke only knows how to do business? Have you forgotten who led the army of Walla to defeat them? Besides, it is better to have the guts than to have the guts. If you don't try, how can you know what you can do? Gentlemen, I'm afraid that you can't be literate from the moment you came out of your mother's womb. Is your literary talent extraordinary? The great Confucian scholars' faces darkened when they heard who was the one who defeated Walla's army. They couldn't help but take half a step back. At this moment, they remembered that the person in front of them was someone who could lead an army to defeat the powerful Walla. He killed people on the battlefield without blinking an eye. If they really angered him, they wouldn't be able to reason with him. On the other hand, He Wenyuan was not as scared as the others. He had a bit of courage. Duke of Loyalty and Courage, don't try to change the topic. You know how to do business, you are proficient in the art of war, and you can lead troops into battle. But that doesn't mean that you are proficient in poetry, or that you have truly comprehended the 4 books and 5 classics. During the Great Ming Dynasty, scholars mostly studied the way of etiquette, which was the so-called matters of the sages and virtuous men, and the records of the sages and virtuous men. For example, the Analects of Confucius, the Book of Rites, the 4 books, the 5 classics, and so on. Only those who were proficient in this study and could quote from the past and the present could be regarded as a person with profound knowledge. Only then would they be placed in an important position by the imperial court, and enjoy a high position. He Wenyuan mentioned these deliberately to humiliate Yang Qindong. He was just a scholar who was bestowed the title of Juren by the emperor. In addition, he was so young, how could he be proficient in these things? He thought that by saying this, he would embarrass Yang Qindong and make him retreat. But unexpectedly, after hearing this, Dong Shuai didn't have a trace of embarrassment on his face. Instead, he laughed loudly. Isn't it just poetry? This duke can just casually open his mouth and it will be done. Ha, ha ha ha. This time, it was He Wenyuan's turn to laugh. Duke of Loyalty and Courage, there are some things that can't be solved just by talking big. You have to know that it's easy to write a poem. However, if you want to write it well and let people remember it, it's extremely difficult. Don't be careless and lose your status. Of course not. Yang Qindong firmly shook his head. Since this duke is going to write poetry, it will not be an ordinary work. If you don't believe me, Assistant Minister can listen to it and then comment. Seeing that Yang Qindong didn't seem to be joking, He Wenyuan was first stunned. Then, he turned to look at the crowd and found that there were many envoys from other countries. He hesitated. It was true that he came to find trouble with Yang Qindong, and it was also true that he came to make him lose face. But if he really made the Duke of Loyalty and Courage lose face in front of the foreign envoys, it would be unsuitable for the country. He Wenyuan's hesitation was seen by Yang Qindong, and it made his impression of this person much better. Knowing the big picture had its advantages. If this person only came to improve his reputation by stepping on him, then after this matter was over, he would have to settle the score. Since He Wenyuan was in such a difficult position, Yang Qindong didn't give him a chance to choose. He, who was originally very confident, opened his mouth and said, I saw it. When Yang Qindong, who had raised the topic, opened his mouth, He Wenyuan and the others immediately shut their mouths and looked at him. When he noticed that everyone's attention was on him, a confident smile flashed across Yang Qindong's face. He continued to say, a shepherd boy rides a yellow ox, his song shakes the forest. He wants to catch a cicada, but suddenly he shuts his mouth. This was written by a famous poet of the Qing dynasty, Yuan Mei. It talked about a little shepherd boy riding on the back of a yellow ox in the dark forest. No one knew what happy thing he had, but he sang along the way. His singing was crisp and loud, and the entire forest was startled by him. Suddenly, the singing stopped. The little shepherd boy straightened his back and closed his mouth. His eyes were fixed on the tall treetops. Cicada, cicada, cicada. In the tree, a cicada was also singing at the top of its lungs. It was the cicada that had attracted the little shepherd boy. He really wanted to catch the cicada. And using this poem, Yang Chendong was also comparing He Wen Yuan and the other scholars' arrival to cicada. He himself was a child that could be caught if he wanted to. Comparing a poem to a person, the moment I saw it came out, the expressions of He Wen Yuan and the others could not help but change greatly. However, this was not the end. It was only the beginning. Yang Chendong's footsteps moved slightly. After taking half a step forward, he opened his mouth and said, "Lotus, an autumn cloud with a speck of red, 10 lotus leaves and 5 flowers. There's no need to close the door to sleep by the lake, the cool breeze fills the house every night. Water dragons chant, white lotus, who removed the red coat for, the green room welcoming the dawn frost. The Huansha people go, the Lingbo people stay, the crystal palace. A few pavilions, 10 miles of silver pond, the cold fragrance blows everywhere. In the dusky gull and heron, the bright flowers of the night, deep and indistinct. What's more, the clouds are clear and practiced, the dance is light and graceful, the fan is half lowered. Light makeup, the moonlight, immortal and elegant, the powder faded. When the small boat returns, the duckweed opens, the mirror looks out. Afraid of the remains, the cold waves, the 10,000 leaves, the west wind war. The former was a poem by Chao Yin of the Qing, and the latter was a poem by Wang Chutong of the Qing. In addition to what they had seen before, there were a total of 3 poems. They were almost all connected, and were all good quatrains. For a moment, it naturally shocked He Wen Yuan and the others, making it impossible for them to find the problem. They were shocked, but Yang Chendong did not seem to be satisfied. He looked at He Wen Yuan and the others who had come looking for trouble and said, "Poetry is only a small path. As long as you study hard and accumulate, it is not difficult to create good sentences. Don't you think so? Well, since you have come today, it would not be right if I did not give you something. This way, I will give you a poem. You must listen carefully. If there is anything you do not understand, you can come back and ask me." Ha ha ha. Yang Chendong's proud laughter fell into the eyes of He Wen Yuan and the others, making them angry. No matter what, they were people who had been studying for half their lives. Yang Chendong would only be 20 years old during the new year. Even if he could compose a quatrain, it would be impossible for them to ask for advice. This was simply an insult. Everyone looked at Yang Chendong with a few more traces of anger and annoyance. On the other hand, He Wen Yuan seemed to have a pretty good ability to calm himself down. When he looked at Yang Chendong, he said, "I wonder what loyal and gallant Duke has to teach us. We are willing to take a look. If there is something we don't understand, we can naturally ask for guidance. However, if you say it out loud, we will understand immediately." "Huh, you don't have that high of an IQ." Who would have thought that Yang Chendong directly interrupted He Wen Yuan and said, "Listen carefully, I will only say it once. Whether you remember it or not depends on your luck. If you want to learn, you can come and ask for guidance in the future." Yang Chendong seemed to be very confident as he raised his head to look at the sky above him. After muttering to himself for a moment, he slowly said, "The Shi clan's history of lion eating." As soon as the name came out, He Wen Yuan and the others were stunned. They were indeed smart enough to suddenly think of something. But then he looked at Yang Chendong with an impossible look, completely with a look of disbelief. However, Yang Chendong didn't even look at them. Instead, he looked up to the sky and said, "Stone chamber poet Shi, the gluttonous lion, swears to eat 10 lions. From time to time, he was a lion in the eyes of the city. 10 o'clock, Shi city. At that time, the clan saw the 10 lions with the power of the 10-stone arrow, and the 10 lions died. She picked up 10 lions' corpses, which fit the stone chamber. The stone chamber was wet, so she sent a servant to clean the stone chamber. She began to eat 10 lions' corpses. When eating, the initial knowledge was 10 lion corpses, 10 stone lion corpses. At that time, the clan's primordial knowledge was the truth. Testing is the matter." When the poem was finally finished, Yang Chendong let out a light breath. For this poem, for this moment of pretentiousness, he had put in a lot of effort last night. Fortunately, he had memorized it perfectly without a word wrong. This poem talked about a poet surnamed Shi. He lived in a house made of stone. He was especially fond of lions and loved to eat lions. He swore to eat 10 lions. He often went to the market to see if lions had appeared. One day, at 10 o'clock, 10 lions just happened to appear in the market. At that time, Shi Jun also came to the market. He saw these 10 lions, so he took out his bow and arrow and shot these 10 lions to death. Shi Jun then picked up the 10 lion corpses and prepared to move them to the stone chamber where he lived. Unfortunately, this stone chamber was very wet. Shi Jun told his servant to wipe the stone chamber clean. After the stone chamber was cleaned, he began to try to eat these 10 lion corpses. When he was about to eat, he realized that these 10 lion corpses weren't real lion corpses, but 10 lions made of stone. Chapter 235. This was a strange article written by Mr. Zhao Yuanren, a famous linguist and the father of modern linguistics, in the 1930s in the United States. The original title of the article was, "The History of the Stone Chamber Poets Eating Lions." The full text was 94 words, later expanded to 103 words, including the title of the article, a total of 110 words. If it was read aloud in Mandarin, people who did not understand ancient Chinese would not be able to understand it at all. The reason was that modern Mandarin had lost the entering tone and voicing of ancient Chinese. This was a classic that represented the breadth and profoundness of the Chinese language and Chinese characters. At that time, it had caused a great reaction. Now that it was taken out by Yang Qindong, as expected, He Wenyuan and the others were speechless. They could feel the artistic conception of this poem, and it was very extraordinary. However, because Yang Qindong spoke too quickly and used the same words, they could not understand the essence of it from just one reading. It was precisely because they could not fully understand that at this moment, He Wenyuan and the others were shocked. They stood there dumbfounded and did not know what to say. Isn't it too fast? You don't understand? It doesn't matter, as long as you humbly ask for guidance, I can write down what I just said and take it back for you to study. As if he had already expected such a possibility, Yang Qindong had a very natural and even sincere smile on his face. However, no matter how you looked at it, these smiles seemed a bit too fake, so fake that He Wenyuan and the others felt a sense of shame. In a feudal society where everything was inferior and only scholarly attainments were valued, scholars valued their reputation very much. Not to mention an important imperial court official like He Wenyuan, who was originally a heavenly official of the Ministry of Personnel. Who knew how many students he had, all over the world? How could such a person be willing to bow his head so casually? If you asked him to bow his head in front of everyone and ask for guidance from a young boy who was not even 20 years old, it would be worse than killing him. He Wenyuan would not bow his head no matter what. At this moment, he knew that Yang Qindong was humiliating him, so how could he fulfill the other party's wish? He raised his head with some difficulty, clasped his hands together, and turned to leave. What I saw, lotus, water dragon's roar, white lotus, and white lotus had already defeated them, not to mention that there was also the history of the Shi family eating a lion as the foundation. At this moment, they really didn't know what other meaning there was for them to stay here other than asking for humiliation. He Wenyuan and the others left just like that. When he came with such fanfare and was full of confidence. But when he left, he was so straightforward and so dejected. It was really satisfying. Once these troublemakers left, there was nothing left to watch. Many people also left because of this. However, there were also some scholars who stayed. At this moment, they looked at Yang Qindong with shining eyes and shouted, "Duke Zhongdan, can you write down the history of lion-eating Shi for us scholars to admire?" One person shouted. Soon, many like-minded people followed and shouted, expressing their strong desire for knowledge. Unfortunately, Yang Qindong didn't agree. Instead, he shook his head and said, this Duke understands your intentions. If you want the history of lion-eating sure to be famous in the world, you must have Lord He and the others personally admit their mistakes. Otherwise, no one can force this Duke to do anything. You should go back. If you have the time to stay here and talk to this Duke, why don't you go and persuade Lord He and the others? If they are really thinking for the sake of all the scholars in the world, what's the big deal if they bow their heads once? It seemed like he was pointing out a path for everyone, but he just wanted to use them to put pressure on He Wenyuan. Since they dared to come to Yang village to find trouble with him, they should know the serious consequences of angering him. If he didn't punish them properly, others would follow suit. How could he calm down and do anything else? With Yang Chendong's firm attitude, the scholars who stayed behind knew that it would be difficult for them to take a turn for the better. They immediately cupped their fists and left. Then, one by one, they began to look for their classmates. First, they wanted to tell them what had happened today. Second, they wanted to see if there was any way they could find Lord He and the others and have them admit their mistakes. After all, such a masterpiece shouldn't be buried. It should be spread throughout the world. Soon, most of the people had left. In the end, only Junko and her guards remained. Seeing that everyone had left, the guard captain, Kobayashi, was extremely confused. Princess, we should go back. If we are late, who knows how long we'll have to wait to eat in the immortal abode? Immortal abode? Kobayashi? Could it be that you've forgotten who founded it? The Yang village must have even better delicacies. Why should we give up what's near for what's far away? Junko was already curious about Yang Chendong. In terms of age, the person in front of her was only 4 or 5 years older than her. There wasn't much of a difference. However, in terms of literary talent and ability, he was far superior to her. Junko had been influenced by her father ever since she was a child. She had always been diligent in her studies. After learning about Japan, she developed a strong interest in the culture of the Great Ming Dynasty. After all, the Great Ming Dynasty was far more fertile than Japan. It was vast and rich in resources, and had a much richer history. After coming into contact with the culture of the Great Ming Dynasty and learning about this country, she was quickly drawn in. She knew that this was a country filled with talented people. It was as if there was some kind of magic here. Every once in a while, when the country entered a period of weakness or decline, an extremely powerful figure would appear. That person would step forward to restore order and revitalize the country. They would become even stronger and become a powerful country revered by all. This was the path that Japan had to take. Gradually, Junko was no longer satisfied with her studies. She came to the Great Ming Dynasty just when her father wanted to use the power of the Great Ming Dynasty's marriage to strengthen his ruling power. In Japan, although Junko was still young, she was already famous. Many people even called her the first beauty and the most intelligent woman in Japan for hundreds of years. For a girl to have an angelic face meant that she had endless wealth, not to mention that she was so smart and knowledgeable. If she stayed in Japan, she would have achieved something in the future. However, she didn't do so. Instead, she chose to come to the Great Ming Dynasty. Even if she knew that by doing so, she might have to live with a person she didn't like and didn't know. However, she still didn't regret it. This was because she admired the culture of the Great Ming Dynasty. Now, knowing that the marriage with the Great Ming Dynasty's imperial family might be difficult to continue, Junko's goal this time no longer existed. It was impossible for her to say that she wasn't disappointed at all. But now, she met Yang Chendong, the youngest upstart in the Great Ming Dynasty. He was the youngest person to become a duke with his own hands. His performance just now was so free and easy. He was so smart and knowledgeable. Wasn't such a person the kind of person she wanted to know and find? At this moment, Junko suddenly had an idea. That was, she wanted to stay. She wanted to get in touch with this loyal duke of the Great Ming Dynasty. She wanted to see if he was really talented or just an ignorant and incompetent playboy. If it was the former, she wanted to see if there was anything worth learning. If it was simply to see if she could accept him for her own use. If he was really capable and could play a big role in helping her father, this trip to the Great Ming Dynasty could be considered to have some gains. Of course, Yang Chendong wouldn't accept her, but Junko never worried about this. In her opinion, she was so beautiful. In Japan, even men who were about the same age as her father, or even a lot older than her father, couldn't help but show a greedy look when they saw her. This was where her charm lay. She firmly believed that Yang Chendong would be like other men and would comply with all her requests. After telling the guard Captain Kobayashi that she wanted to stay here for a while, Junko strode forward and turned around. She chased after Yang Chendong, who was walking towards the courtyard of the Yang family manor. "Loyal Duke, please wait." The voice of an oriole spread out along with the wind. Yang Chendong, who was striding forward, felt a slight vibration in his ear. His footsteps slowly stopped. It was said that one could recognize a woman by smelling her fragrance, but at the same time, some people also said that a woman's voice was also a kind of name card. When a man heard a beautiful voice, he couldn't help but imagine what the owner of the voice would look like. Just like now, Yang Chendong, when he heard this voice, he had an urgent idea to see what kind of woman could make such a beautiful voice. His footsteps stopped, and his body slowly turned around. When he looked up, his eyes just happened to meet with Junko's gaze. Junko was more than 1.6 meters tall. Perhaps because she was still young, her figure was slightly petite, but it made her have the gentleness and grace of a woman in the Great Ming Dynasty. She had a lock of beautiful hair that fluttered in the wind. Her eyebrows were slender and long, and her eyes were full of charm. Her nose was straight, and her cheeks were slightly flushed. Her lips were tender and alluring, and her dimples were as white as snow. Her skin was as white as jade, and her skin was as white as jade. On her oval face, her eyes were quick-witted, and there was another kind of moving charm in them. At this time, Junko was looking at Yang Chendong with a smile. Her smile was so pure and so clean that Yang Chendong couldn't help but have a feeling that she was an angel in the world. This was the first time Yang Chendong saw Junko, and he had to admit that he was indeed shocked by her beauty. Standing there, he showed a rare look of loss of self-control and stared straight at her for 3 seconds. Chapter 236. Yang Chendong's performance fell into Junko's eyes, and she was very proud of herself. Appearance was her greatest weapon, and now it seemed that it was really effective. Presumably, no matter what kind of request she put forward next, this loyal duke of the Great Ming Dynasty would definitely not refuse. Junko's pride lasted for 3 seconds. When she wanted to see Yang Chendong's performance, to her disappointment, he actually returned to his previous indifferent smile. She felt that the absent-minded loyal duke just now was so unreal, as if she had imagined it. "Who are you? Where are you from?" While Junko was still in a daze, Yang Chendong had already asked her about her origin. The reason why he asked this question was also because of Yang Chendong's confidence. With the power of the Security Bureau, if there was really such a young and beautiful woman in the capital, it was impossible for them not to even mention it. Although he had never ordered Yang Chendong to collect beautiful women, if there was such a woman, Yang Chendong believed that his subordinates would definitely report it. But there was no such report, so there could only be one answer: this woman did not belong to the capital. Junko had always regarded men as nothing, and except for her father, she rarely pretended to talk to men. But for some reason, when Yang Chendong asked her this question, she couldn't help but reveal her identity. She replied softly, "My name is Ohara Junko, and I am the Princess of Japan." But just after she said this, the captain of the guards, Kobayashi, whispered in disbelief, "Princess, be careful with your words." No wonder Kobayashi was so nervous. It was because Junko's identity had never been disclosed to the outside world. Even the Ministry of Rights of the Great Ming Dynasty did not know about her existence. But now, she took the initiative to reveal it. No wonder he was so anxious. "I'm sorry, Kobayashi, I forgot myself." Junko, who heard the reminder, immediately blushed. She knew that she had made a mistake, and it was not a small mistake. she immediately whispered to Kobayashi in Japanese. The conversation between Kobayashi and Junko was in Japanese, and there was not much difference between it and the Japanese of the later generations. But in the relatively isolated Great Ming Dynasty, there were very few people who could really understand this language, and Yang Qindong was one of them. In his previous life, he went to Japan to perform many tasks, so naturally, he was very familiar with the language there. At this moment, he naturally heard the conversation between the master and servant. Although he understood it, the clever Yang Qindong still pretended that he didn't understand it, and even showed that he didn't understand anything. He didn't even clearly hear the first sentence of the identity introduction in Chinese. What did you say? Junko? What a strange name. Where are you from? Who are your parents? When Yang Qindong asked like this, it could be noticed that Junko's face instantly relaxed a lot. Junko only heard her name and didn't understand the identity introduction. At the same time, she quickly thought of another identity and said, I'm a businessman from Japan, an ally of the Great Ming Dynasty. I've long heard that the capital of the Great Ming Dynasty is so prosperous, and I always yearn for it. This time, I came out to see the world. Soon, she fabricated an identity, and it was half true and half false, which was no problem for most people in the Great Ming Dynasty. But in the end, she underestimated Yang Qindong too much. Not to mention whether the security bureau could find out her true identity. For a loyal man who knew Japanese, what secrets could she have in front of him? It's just that Yang Qindong didn't mean to point it out. Since the other party had intentionally concealed their identity, they must have other motives. Although he was curious, he still decided to get in touch with them and see if there were any opportunities for him to gain. Of course, whether this was related to Junko's beautiful appearance, only the sixth young master Yang himself knew. It turned out to be a foreign friend. Hee, it's this official's eyes that are blind. As you said, the capital of the Great Ming Dynasty is indeed very prosperous. Since you're here, you should take a good look. But forgive this eunuch for being busy, so I won't accompany you. Yang Qindong said with a smile. After saying this, he turned around and left. Yang Qindong's performance, in addition to being polite, also had a trace of unfamiliarity, which made Junko very unhappy. All along, men in her eyes were just lives that only had desires. As long as she wanted, she could summon them at any time and send them away at any time. How could there be someone like Yang Qindong, who didn't seem to be moved by her appearance and took the initiative to keep people 1,000 miles away? Maybe it was because he was not convinced, or maybe it was because he wanted to prove something. Junko unexpectedly said, Great Ming Dynasty's loyal duke, you just said, the history of lion-eating sure, too quickly. This little girl didn't understand it very well. I don't know if you can ask for advice? This little girl actually admires the loyal duke very much. While speaking, Junko also showed a shy look as much as possible. This was what she learned from the concubines in her father's imperial palace. Although she looked down on that kind of woman from the bottom of her heart, she had to admit that in order to survive, sometimes their special performance was indeed worth learning. Oh. You, a girl, are also interested in the history of lion-eating sure? Yang Qindong, who had half of his body turned around, suddenly raised the corner of his mouth at this moment. He deliberately showed an attitude of isolating the other party in order to change from passivity to initiative. Women, sometimes beautiful women, were so strange. The more you took the initiative, the more unwilling the other party would be to pay attention to you. On the contrary, if you ignored the other party would look at you differently. Just now, Yang Qindong deliberately showed a different attitude, and sure enough, Junko was hooked. Since the other party had such a request, Yang Qindong, who wanted to know the other party's purpose, naturally wouldn't be polite. Yes, Great Ming Dynasty's loyal duke, this little girl is indeed very interested in the history of lion-eating sure. Seeing Yang Qindong turn around, Junko immediately showed a confident look. You can call me Dong Shui like others. Since Junko is interested, why don't we talk about it in the manner? Yang Qindong politely maintained a smile, and then made a gentlemanly gesture. Seeing Yang Chendong's invitation, Junko was very happy, and even lowered her head shyly. She knew that such an approach would be very lethal. Thank you, Dong Shuai. Junko agreed and strode toward Yang Chendong. Shaolin and the other bodyguards followed closely behind him, but when they arrived at the gates of the Yang Manor, Hu Mang, who had always been by the sixth young master's side, suddenly stretched out his large hand and blocked Shaolin and the others. He then said in a heavy voice, "The manor is an important place and is considered private property. Outsiders are not allowed to enter without permission. It would be best if you all stood guard outside." Shaolin was a little dissatisfied that the princess wasted her limited time in such a seemingly ordinary manner. Now that he heard that he and others were not allowed to enter, how could he be willing to comply? He immediately widened his eyes, looked at Tiger's mane, and said loudly, "Baka." "Huh? What do you want to do?" Although Tiger's mane did not understand Japanese and did not understand the meaning of this sentence, he could see that Shaolin was angry. He immediately glared back at him with an unyielding look. As soon as Tiger's mane got angry, the tall Beta Persei directly took a step forward, almost sticking to Shaolin. Then, with his unique height, he stared at Shaolin condescendingly, as if he was ready to attack at any time. Not only Beta Persei, but even Yang Wu, as well as Ling Feng of Chiu V's first guard, also looked ready to attack at any time. The originally harmonious atmosphere became a lot more tense because of Shaolin's words. A murderous aura filled the place, and even Junko, who did not know Kung Fu, felt a chill. Junko didn't understand why she felt this way, but she was smart enough to know that she didn't have any advantage right now. She immediately scolded Kobayashi in Japanese, "Kobayashi-kun, this is not Japan, nor is it the palace. Please control your temper and personality. Princess, they don't let us in. What if someone wants to harm you? Won't it be very dangerous?" Shaolin replied, not to be outdone. In Japan, seniority was still very important. Shaolin was just a guard captain. Logically speaking, he should not talk to his master like this. But when it came to the other person's life, he did not have to worry so much. It was because Junko knew this that she did not blame Shaolin. On the contrary, she also thought that it was indeed too risky to enter Yang Village alone. After a slight hesitation, she nodded, "Well, you are right. Let's leave." After Junko finished talking to Kobayashi, she looked at Yang Chendong and said with a beautiful smile, "Dong Shuai, I'm very sorry. My servant reminded me that I have something important to do. I think I have to leave first." She even knew the name of the servant. Yang Chendong was very interested in Junko. He was even more curious about her purpose in coming to the great Ming dynasty. That is really bad news. But since Miss Junko has something important to do, I won't delay you any longer, please. Thank you Dong Shuai for your understanding. If there is a chance, I will definitely come to visit Dong Shuai. Junko said very politely. There will definitely be a chance. Yang Chendong said with incomparable certainty. Of course, in Junko's eyes, it was hard to say whether this person was too arrogant or not. Finally, Junko left with Xiaolin and 7 or 8 guards. She left Yangjia village. Yang Chendong's gaze followed them as they left. Even when they were out of sight, Yang Chendong still maintained the same posture as before. Chapter 237. Cough, young master, Miss Junko has left. Seeing Yang Chendong still standing there in a daze, although Tiger's mane didn't want to, he still reminded him. Well, I know. Hearing this, Yang Chendong came back to his senses, but his face was as usual, without the slightest embarrassment. In fact, there was nothing to be embarrassed about, because he wasn't thinking about Junko, nor her beauty, but the purpose of her visit. Because in the history he knew, there didn't seem to be such a woman, but she still came, which could only mean one thing, that history has changed, and his advantage of foresight has gradually been lost. In fact, in history, although there was a person called Junko, she didn't come to the Ming dynasty. At that time, although the Ming dynasty defeated the Walla, it was a narrow victory, and such a record certainly didn't attract the admiration and respect of others, so Junko didn't come to the Ming dynasty. All of this changed because of the appearance of Yang Chendong. Tiger's Mane informed the Security Bureau to investigate the Japanese diplomatic mission, if necessary, spend a lot of money to buy 1 or 2 people. It was precisely because he knew that the advantage of foresight was gone, that Yang Chendong needed to deal with everything carefully. "Young master, don't worry," Tiger's Mane said confidently. In their eyes, a small country like Japan was just a pirate, not worthy of being treated seriously. This was all because he didn't know that the invasion of Japan would happen hundreds of years later, and he didn't know what kind of ambitions the country on this island would have in the future. But Yang Chendong knew, instinctively, he never underestimated this country and its people, so he paid special attention to anything related to them. With the order of the 6th young master, the Security Bureau quickly and effectively operated. Soon, they bribed a cook from the Japanese diplomatic mission with a large sum of money. From the cook, they not only learned about Junko's situation, but also made a rough outline of the political situation in Japan. The information was sent to Yang Chendong's study early the next morning, and after the 6th young master spent a lot of effort to deal with Hu Yen and the other girls, he saw the latest information on the table. Junko's appearance naturally couldn't be hidden from Hu Yen and Xiao Yin, the 2 girls who stayed in the manor. In fact, Yang Chendong didn't need to hide it from them. It was precisely because of this that Hu Yen and Xiao Yin felt a sense of crisis when they heard that a beautiful girl, who was only 15 or 16 years old, had appeared outside the Yang family manor and met with the 6th young master. After some discussion, they immediately notified Madame Xue and Madame Xiang, who were still in the capital, who were editing the program. That night, they had a fierce battle with Yang Chendong, but the 6th young master, who was in peak condition, was not afraid of them, and just spent a little more time and effort to deal with them. In the morning, Yang Chendong saw the information on the table, and it gave him a general understanding of the current situation in Japan, and at the same time, he quickly came up with a way to deal with it. Once, the non-mainstream crosstalk actor Guo Digang said, "Give me 3,000 urban management, and I can flatten Tokyo." Yang Chendong also had such a dream, but it could only be a dream. Under the premise of world peace, such a dream was destined to be impossible and impossible to achieve. But now, it was different. Although it was still the same world, it was hundreds of years earlier, and the world had not even experienced the First World War. Some of the powerful countries in history were still in the early stages of development, and some, such as the United States, had not even appeared yet. With such a good opportunity, Yang Chendong would of course make the first move, and the so-called powerful countries could go to hell. There could only be one order in this world, and that was, the Han people were the masters, the Han people were the center, and the Han people's will was the world's will, and the Han people's thoughts were the world's thoughts. Since that was the case, there was no need for Japan to exist, and it was inevitable to understand them in advance. Yang Chendong also thought about this problem when he had nothing to do. Japan was different from some Western countries, and they actually had some relations with the Han people. Some people even said that Japan was a branch of the Han people, and there was a basis for it. Although it was not accepted by the world, one thing was true, and that was, other than the language, the Japanese looked the most similar to the Han people. Should such a country be completely destroyed, or assimilated for his own use? If it was the latter, what should he do? Junko's appearance was an opportunity to let Yang Chendong see the opportunity to break the fortress from the inside. "Come on, inform Yang San, let him spread the news, and do it like this." Calling Tiger's Mane in front of him, Yang Chendong whispered. In a medium-sized inn in the capital, Junko had just woken up, but looking at her state, it was obvious that she did not sleep well last night. After coming out of the Yang village, Junko did not idle, but did a lot of work and understanding. But the more she did so, the more Yang Chendong's name lingered in her mind. Previously, she only knew that the army that defeated the Walla was led by a loyal duke of the great Ming dynasty. In the future, it was just a matter of relying on the strength of the army and the number of people to win. But after yesterday's trip to Yang village, Junko had a certain understanding of him. She realized how young and talented this Duke of Loyalty was, and how he managed to achieve what he had today. Yang Bao, Immortal Abode, Heaven Beyond Heaven, Yang Family Bank, and Yang Family Bank, one after another, especially the most mysterious mercenary group. When all this information was gathered in front of Junko, she could not even look down on this person. Princess, what's wrong? Did you not sleep well last night? Captain Kobayashi walked into the room at this time, and when he saw Junko's slightly haggard appearance, he immediately asked with a face full of surprise. Kobayashi was secretly happy to accept the task of protecting Junko. He was also a man, and a young man at that, so he naturally liked Junko's appearance very much. But he was very clear about the difference between his identity and the princess's. It was impossible to be together, but being able to have close contact with her, how could it not be a kind of satisfaction? Therefore, in his heart, Kobayashi cared a lot about Junko. Seeing that the princess seemed to be in a bad mood, he naturally turned pale with fright. It's nothing, Kobayashi. I just miss my imperial father a little. By the way, I'll have to trouble you to collect information about this loyal duke. The more the better, and the more detailed the better. Please. Junko forced a charming smile and said to Kobayashi. Hai, please rest assured, princess. I will do it immediately. Kobayashi saw that the princess was so happy with him, and was naturally very happy. He immediately agreed and turned around to carry out the task. But what Kobayashi did not know was that not long after he left, the Japanese diplomatic mission arrived in the vicinity of the inn and began to investigate. This time, the Japanese diplomatic mission sent a lot of people, and many of them were representatives of merchants. They wanted to investigate the Great Ming Dynasty's market and see if there was any possibility of further trade relations. While deepening the understanding between the two countries, it would also enrich the Japanese economy. After all, a small country like Japan almost had to buy many things from outside. This gave Junko an opportunity. After spending a lot of money to get a place, she disguised herself as a man and hid in the diplomatic mission. Logically speaking, she was not discovered all the way. Now that she had successfully arrived at the Great Ming Dynasty's capital, the possibility of being discovered was even smaller. But all of this was ruined by the appearance of Yang Chendong. Not long ago, the head of the Japanese diplomatic mission, Aoki Yuki, received an important message from his cook. It was that the daughter of the emperor, Ohara Junko, had arrived in the Great Ming Dynasty and was walking around with ominous intentions. When he received this news, Aoki Yuki's face was naturally full of disbelief. He was the confidant of General Ashikaga Yoshimasa, which was why he was able to get such a good job. But if he let the general know that the princess was also in the diplomatic mission and was in contact with the higher-ups of the Great Ming Dynasty, his life would be in danger. Therefore, regardless of whether the news was true or false, Aoki Yuki had to investigate the matter clearly. If he believed that Princess Junko was really in the Great Ming Dynasty, then there was no need to say anything. He had to kill her. First, to eliminate future troubles, and second, to create a gap between the Great Ming Dynasty and the Emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty. If there was a murder case, it would be even more difficult to unite them. The Emperor would have to rely on the power of General Ashikaga Yoshimasa. Only in this way could the general's position be unshakable. Aoki Yuki made a decision and immediately called his guard, Iwai Shang, to report the news. At the same time, he also ordered an investigation. If the situation was true, he could deal with it on the spot. After receiving the order, Iwai Shang brought people to the inn. After investigating, they really found out that Junko was in the inn. While Iwai Shang was shocked, he reported the news to the higher-ups and informed the head of the diplomatic mission, Aoki Yuki. After some discussion, they decided to take action while it was dark. They had to kill Junko and the others in the capital of the Great Ming Dynasty. Through the cook who was bribed with money and the observation of the Security Bureau's spies, Yang Chendong easily determined the decision and mission of the Japanese diplomatic mission. He immediately laughed. Very good, the young master naturally won't let go of the opportunity. A hero saving a beauty? This young master likes it very much. Immediately, after Yang Chendong sighed, he also made a careful arrangement. In the evening, Shaolin, who had been running around all day, rushed back with a few guards. According to the instructions of Princess Junko, they collected a lot of information about Yang Qindong. Chapter 238. Speaking of which, this truly wasn't that difficult of a task, because any random person from the streets of the capital would be able to tell one some stories about the Dong Shui. Bringing a lot of information back to the inn, Kobayashi handed it over to Junko. When he saw the happy expression on her face, he felt that his efforts today weren't in vain. Only now did he have time to eat something to fill his stomach. Just as Kobayashi was about to start eating, a trusted guard came in from outside the door. "Captain, the situation outside doesn't seem right. I keep feeling that there is a pair of eyes watching us in the dark." "What?" Throwing away the food in his hand, Kobayashi turned around and looked at the guard who came to report the news with a shocked face. He believed in the ability of his subordinates, and there were some things that he wouldn't say casually. Even if he said it, he should be able to find something. At this moment, he didn't want to eat anymore. Instead, he turned around and walked out of the kitchen, went to a corner of the small courtyard, and began to close his eyes and sense. Kobayashi was originally a guard of the royal family. Because of his outstanding performance, he was arranged to protect the safety of Princess Junko. His strength wasn't weak, and he even came from a ninja family. It was precisely because of this that he quickly sensed something different and a vague sense of danger. Ninjas sometimes have a very strong sixth sense, and Ikigami and the others aren't that strong, so Kobayashi quickly felt the danger. When he learned that he was being watched, Kobayashi didn't panic. This was originally within his expectations. With so many people, and the princess was so beautiful, it was difficult not to be discovered, but he didn't expect it to be so fast. It was precisely because he was prepared that Kobayashi calmly came to the young master's room. At this time, Junko was looking down at some information about Yang Qindong. When she saw the guard captain suddenly appear, she was a little surprised. "Kobayashi? Don't you need to rest? Why are you here?" "We don't need you now, go rest." "Princess, we've been discovered. There are many unfamiliar faces outside the inn. It's very likely that they were sent by Ambassador Aoki. I think we need to move," Shaolin said in a slightly anxious voice, his eyes filled with determination. Junko was like a goddess in Kobayashi's eyes. As long as he was still alive, he would never let anyone hurt the princess. He swore. "What?" Junko said in Japanese in surprise, and then a hint of nervousness appeared on her face. Originally, according to Junko's plan, the danger was only on the voyage from Japan to the Great Ming Dynasty. As long as she safely arrived at the Great Ming Dynasty, she could reveal her identity and then propose marriage to the Great Ming Dynasty's emperor. At that time, whether she chose a prince or even the Great Ming Dynasty's emperor, she would not have to worry about her safety. However, because she had no understanding of the situation in the Great Ming Dynasty, she didn't know until she came to the capital. Although the Great Ming Dynasty's emperor had a prince, he was still in his infancy and it was impossible to arrange a marriage. As for the Great Ming Dynasty's emperor Zhu Qiyu, although he was very young, he didn't have any deep foundation. In addition, there were many concubines in the palace. Even if he wanted to arrange a marriage, it would be difficult for him to provide any help to Japan in a short time. Not to mention that the Great Ming Dynasty was now ruled by two emperors. She hadn't even solved her own problems. It was even more difficult to get support. The marriage didn't seem to be feasible, so Junko didn't immediately reveal her identity, which also made her safer. Now that the opponent finally came to her door, how could she not panic? "Kobayashi, where are we going?" After the panic, Junko pretended to be calm and said. After all, she was only a little girl less than 16 years old. Although she was born noble and very beautiful, when it came to facing a real sword, she was afraid that she didn't have any more experience than others. "Kobayashi doesn't know." He shook his head very honestly. "Princess, you can choose to reveal your identity and marry the Great Ming Dynasty's emperor as a concubine, or we can kill our way out of the capital. find a place with a coastline, and find a boat to return home. Although Kobayashi was confident in his own strength, he only had 8 guards with him this time, and the disadvantage in numbers was his shortcoming. He knew very well that Aoki Yuki, as an ambassador, was leading a team of nearly 500 people. Among them, there were more than 300 soldiers who could fight. He didn't have much confidence in ensuring Naoki's safety in a battle of 8 against 300 people. Let me think about it. Junko didn't expect the choice to come so quickly, and she couldn't make a decision for the time being. After all, this was related to her marriage. The man a woman chose was often related to her life's happiness, so she had to think about it. Princess, there's not much time left. Please make a decision as soon as possible. I'll go out and take a look. Kobayashi didn't want Junko to make the first choice. No man would be able to accept the idea of giving away their goddess. But he couldn't guarantee that the princess could leave safely, so he was in a dilemma. He might as well not participate and let the princess make a wise decision. Some decisions weren't so easy to make. While Junko was still in a dilemma, Kobayashi once again entered the room without permission. This time, his face became much more serious. Princess, it's already dark, and they're about to make a move. There are enemies at the front door, back door, and side door of the inn. I'm afraid we'll have to kill our way out. Kill our way out? Will we die? Junko's nature as a young girl finally revealed itself. After all, she was still young, and few people wouldn't be afraid in the face of death. Junko's expectant expression made Kobayashi's heart bleed. He didn't want to disappoint the princess, but he didn't have absolute confidence. He could only avoid the question and say, Princess, as long as I'm still alive, I won't let anyone hurt you. The hidden meaning was that as long as Kobayashi was still alive, he would desperately protect Junko's safety. But what if he died? After Junko understood the meaning of these words, she nodded with a blank expression. Well, then we'll rush out. If possible, we'll go to the seaside and find a way to return home. Junko finally made a decision, and that was to not marry the great Ming dynasty. Every woman had her own dreams, not to mention a girl like Junko who had been high and mighty since childhood. She might have more pursuits for marriage, but her man was destined to be different from the rest. He was destined to be the strongest in the world. After Junko decided not to marry the great Ming dynasty, Kobayashi's face lit up with joy. For him, even if they couldn't live together, being able to die together was a very happy thing. After unifying the goal, Junko first changed into a set of black clothes that she had prepared beforehand. The loose clothes not only allowed her to hide better in the dark, but also allowed her to conceal her perfect identity. After everything was done, under the protection of Kobayashi, the group of 6 rushed out of the inn's front door. As expected of a guard who had once stayed in the imperial family, Kobayashi didn't choose to blindly attack. Instead, he sent 2 of his team members to rush out of the back door, and another 2 to rush out of the side door, creating an illusion that they were about to break out of the encirclement. Then, he led the remaining 4 guards to protect the princess from the front door. The reason why they chose the front door was because it was on the street. From here, they could see the soldiers of the military office patrolling the area. Although these people might not necessarily help them, they could at least deter the enemy. Under the leadership of Kobayashi, the 6 people rushed out of the inn's front door. What greeted them was a rain of short arrows. He saw Kobayashi holding a ninja sword and constantly waving it in front of him. One after another, the arrows hit the blade, making crackling sounds before falling to the ground. Hurry up and rush out. Seeing that the enemy had even used bows and arrows, Kobayashi knew that the situation was more serious than he had imagined. These people had no scruples at all. They just wanted to kill the princess. A wave of arrows was blocked by Kobayashi and his team. The price they paid was that one of the guards was injured by an arrow and lost the ability to move quickly. However, at this time, Kobayashi didn't have time to check the injuries of his brothers. What he had to do now was to take advantage of the enemy's second wave of attacks to leave this place as soon as possible. The farther the better. "Follow me, rush out of here." Before he could finish his words, 4 figures suddenly appeared in front of him. They appeared like ghosts, and then 4 ninja swords slashed toward him. 4 ninjas. Facing such opponents, Kobayashi was shocked. At the same time, he stomped his feet on the ground and jumped into the air. He shouted in Japanese, "Protect the princess." Kobayashi couldn't help but be surprised. He originally thought that Ambassador Aoki Yuki only sent samurai. Although they were difficult to deal with, they still had a chance of survival. But now, seeing ninjas who were famous for being good at assassination, he knew that this time, he was afraid that things were not looking good for him. Although the strength of the 4 ninjas was not as good as his, after all, there were too many opponents. If it was just to protect himself or even escape, Kobayashi still had some confidence, but his duty was to protect the princess, which was very difficult to accomplish. Kobayashi, who was in the air, quickly flashed through his mind, but at the same time, his empty left hand was not idle. When he reached into his pocket and took out a few ninja darts in his hand. Swish! With a wave of his left hand, the darts were thrown out with great force. They flew straight toward the 4 ninjas who were chasing after him. Kobayashi, whose strength was far higher than ordinary people, successfully pierced the throat of a ninja. One of the 4 opponents was killed. However, Kobayashi was not happy at all, because he had noticed that the 3 men who were protecting the princess had been surrounded by a group of black-clothed samurai. The princess, who was surrounded in the middle, was pale. She was like a small boat in the sea, which could capsize at any time. You're tuning into the Carefree Valley YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.